Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are just going to wait a few more minutes to allow individuals to join. So we'll get started in about 2 minutes. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for your patience. So welcome. My name is Itzia Beta, and I'm with the Office of Public Participation. And I would like to thank each of you for joining us today. I do understand that we're in difficult times. So thank you for joining the Safe and Affordable Fund for Equity and Resilience program, AKA SAFER, for their 6th advisory group meeting. This is the final advisory group meeting of 2021. Great. Okay, perfect. Now, I do want to advise that this event is being webcast publicly in both English and Spanish. We are also recording today's event and will make sure it is easily accessible to the attendees or anyone that could not join us today. However, the main points throughout our event are being captured by our note takers and will be routed to the advisory group members within 3 weeks of completion. Next slide, please. Now, the Water Board's mission is to preserve, enhance, and restore California's water resources for the benefit of present and future generations, which is why we want to begin this meeting by acknowledging the groups who have and continue to be affected and experience the disadvantages as a result of historical marginalization and whose daily lives are impacted by racism and injustices. As a reminder, our work here today should strengthen and empower those Indigenous and community voices as we work together to provide clean, safe, and affordable water to all Californians. Now, here are some guidelines that I'd like to go over before we begin. If you are not speaking, please mute yourself. We do ask that advisory group members please join by video if possible. We do encourage you to take breaks as needed. And please use your participation packet. Some of you may have received your packet in the mail. Most of us received our packet through email, but please use that packet as all of the information we will be sharing today is in that meeting packet. It includes the agenda, the PowerPoint, and breakout room instructions. If you do find that you have questions or comments, or if you're facing any technical or language assistance issues during this meeting, please email safer@waterboards.ca.gov. I do want to remind folks that we do have an oral interpreter that is providing simultaneous interpretation through the Zoom platform. This allows for the event to be heard in both English and Spanish. We ask that you please remember to speak slowly and clearly to ensure that the interpreter is capturing all of the important conversations that we have here today. If you would like to listen in Spanish, please toggle down to the bottom of your screen. You should see a little globe that underneath says interpretation. And then by clicking it, you will then see the various languages between English and Spanish and select your preferred language. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So here is our presentation outline. So what we're planning on doing today is we are planning on announcing newly appointed advisory group members. We will do the 2020 progress and accomplishments, 2021 goals and timeline. We will be doing an advisory group discussion and breakout, and then we will be going into the funding process. Then we will have time for public comment, and then we will share next steps. So the meeting goals for today are 1, to review 2020 progress and accomplishments and 2021 safer timeline. The second goal is to participate in a breakout room to hear advisory group members share stories of past drinking water projects and then have a discussion over their projects, and then ask any questions, kind of probe into lessons learned and best practices. And lastly, review the State Water Board's funding process and provide feedback on potential improvements. So let's start today's event with a little warmer. So I do want to hear from our participants. When I call your name, unmute yourself and spend about 15 seconds or less sharing your name, your physical location, and a few words or a short sentence describing what you are most proud of for your work in 2020. So if you are calling in, please remember that you can unmute yourself by pressing *6 on your phone. Otherwise, for individuals that would like to speak that are joining us through Zoom, the unmute button is to your left of the bottom of your Zoom slide. So I'm going to start. I'll give an example. So my name is Itze Abeda, and I'm calling from my home in Sacramento. This year, in the new normal for now, as some of my colleagues have called it, I am most proud of being able to produce quality work while juggling distance learning for my 11 and 8-year-old daughters. All right, are we ready? So when I call your name, please introduce yourself and answer those questions. I would like to begin with Benjamin. Is Benjamin not on the call today? Give me 1 second. All right, so then let's move on. Camille. Hi, Camille, can you hear me? I'm going to ask that you unmute yourself. All right, Camille, we will come back to you because I do see that you're here. No worries. All right, Castulo Estrada, would you like to go?
Sure. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name's Castulo Estrada. I'm calling from my office, my work office here in the city of Coachella, where I work. And most proud of, I guess, is that I, probably like everyone else, have been able to manage this whole pandemic on a professional level, personal level, and become a Zoom expert.
Oh yeah, that's been great. We've had to adjust very quickly. Thank you, Castulo. All right, give me one moment. I just want to make sure that the next individual I call is on the line. All right, David, Corey, would you like to go next?
I will try if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Perfect.
Excellent. My name is David Corey. I'm here at home in Dos Palos, California, on the west side of the San Joaquin Valley. I guess I would follow up on, I'm proud to just be a novice Zoom user, and trying to muddle through on these calls. It took me a while to get on this one, but I managed to get it done, and looking forward to when we can meet again in person, because I think the individual relationships and those relationship building part of this process is one of the most fundamental aspects of it, so that we can really come to consensus on important issues.
Yes, I agree with you. And thank you for finding your way to join us today. We appreciate it and enjoy your presence. So thank you for sharing. Okay, let's go with, is Maria on the line? I see Maria is here. Maria, I'm asking if you will unmute yourself.
María Muñoz.
Sí, yes.
Hello.
Hello.
María Muñoz.
Yes.
Ok.
Oh, excuse me, one moment.
Sí, porque es que vemos muchas Marías.
Okay. Un
Sí,
momento.
bueno, yo estoy aquí como participante.
Okay.
Y ahorita pues sí me siento un poquito nerviosa porque nunca he estado en una meeting como esta tan grande. Pero estoy orgullosa de mí, de que, como dijo el compañero, somos expertos ahorita en Zoom, pero también orgullosa en servir a mi comunidad, que es lo que más amo y lo que más me gusta, servir a mi comunidad.
Pues muchas gracias por prestar, María. Okay, so what Maria just advised is that she's here as a participant, but she is very glad to be here and she's very excited to serve her community. So thank you, Maria. There was a little bit of a mix-up. I apologize, but thanks for sharing anyway. We did enjoy hearing what you're most proud of. So let's move on to Dawn.
Yes, good morning.
Dawn, welcome.
I'm Dawn White. I'm calling from my home in Placerville. And I think being appointed to this group and being able to serve here is one of the things I'm most proud of. And secondly, during this COVID situation, I'm really proud of my Golden State Water Company team and how well we've done staying connected and working through all of our initiatives.
Thanks, Dawn. I appreciate that, and we're glad to have you as well, so thank you. All right. Lucy, I see you on my screen. Would you like to go next?
Yes, good morning. My name is Lucy and I'm calling from my house here in the West Goshen. And the thing that I've been very proud of being part of this advisor meeting committee has been something that has brought my attention to see all the needs in our communities, and just being able without this pandemic to look for other resources for our community. So I'm very proud of that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Lucy. And thank you for joining us today. All right, do we want to go back to Camille? Camille, are you able to unmute yourself?
Hi, I'm here. I apologize. I had to take my dog out for a moment.
Oh, that's fine. No problem. Welcome.
No problem. I caught most of the introductions, thankfully. Good morning, everyone. My name is Camille Panu. I'm currently in Irvine, California. This is not what I'm most proud of, but at least within this group, I think the thing that's been the most exciting to see has been the way in which everyone collaborates together, and the ways in which the staff have really responded to comments and tried to change things, and have just done a fantastic job, I think, of reframing how we all approach our work together in a really constructive way. So I want to thank everyone for that, because I think it's difficult to do, and it's very much a partnership. And so I don't know, that was something that I thought was a nice highlight to a year that's otherwise been very difficult.
Yes, I agree with you. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate your perspective, and you're right. We're taking everything that we're learning and we're trying to implement it and make things better. So thank you for sharing. I'd like to call Isabel Solorio.
Hola, buenos días. Mi nombre es Isabel Solorio. Estoy aquí desde mi casa en la comunidad de Lener, en el condado de Fresno. ¿De qué estoy más orgullosa en este año 2020? Bueno, de poder aprender cómo ayudar a mi comunidad, que es lo que más me preocupa, cómo manejar toda esta situación de lo que estamos pasando, la pandemia. He aprendido algo nuevo, como poderme conectar por Zoom, algo que nunca lo había hecho, pero estoy ya muy orgullosa de poder seguir trabajando y de al final de cuentas hacer lo mejor posible para mi comunidad. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. So Isabel shared that she is joining us from Lanier in Fresno, her home. She is most proud of being able to learn and being able to help her community, which is what is a priority to her. In this situation, in the pandemic, she had learned how to use Zoom, which she had never done before. But she is grateful to still be working and to be able to help her community. Muchas gracias, María, por prestar. Perdón, Isabel, gracias.
Gracias.
Okay, so let's see. Horacio, would you like to share? All right, we will return to Horacio. Jesse Snyder, would you like to share in this warmer?
Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name's Jessie Snyder. I'm at my home in Visalia. I guess something I would identify from this year is that, it's been really exciting to be part of developing the SAFER program and being able to contribute to the program itself, but then also as a technical assistance provider, build our team at Self-Help Enterprises to also help implement the program. So it's been really exciting on several levels for me, and I have appreciated the opportunity to be part of this committee.
Thank you, Jesse. We appreciate the work that you've done and that you continue to do. So thank you for sharing. All right, so let's see. Katie Porter, would you like to share?
Good morning. My name is Katie Porter. I'm based in Los Angeles. And for 2020, as a lot of people have already mentioned, with the pandemic just kind of creating an upheaval, I think I'm really proud that I've been able to keep this as a priority, and this group has been able to keep these efforts as a priority, especially with resources changing and shifting, and really everyone's made strides to stay connected and to really listen to each other, and to keep moving everything forward on a pace that I think demonstrates the urgency of needing to provide clean, safe, and accessible, affordable water to everyone. So I really appreciate that collectively we can all continue to do that.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, you're right. At a time where we're kind of separated without wanting to be, we are also very much connected. So thanks for that. Don James. Are you here? Would you like to share? All right, we will return to Don James. Let's see. Elena Saldivar, would you like to share?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I'm calling from here from Pixley, California, my home. And I'm most proud of being able to meet such wonderful people and us learning from each other and really seeing that there's progress being made as far as us getting to the goal of having safe water for everybody. I've learned a lot, and I will continue to keep connected at the meetings as, just as a general audience. So because it's very interesting to me, I've been able to share some of this with my community. and good things have come out of it. And so I want to thank all of you, and I'm so thankful for the opportunity to have been a part of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. All right, Emily Rooney, would you like to go?
Sure. Thanks for having us today. I'm Emily Rooney. I'm calling from my house in Lodi, California, where I am also homeschooling a 6-year-old boy. In terms of our work in 2020, from an Ag Council perspective, I think one of the proudest things I am for my membership is early on in the pandemic, we were able to coordinate some pretty significant food donations for food banks, which resulted in the tens of thousands of meals, frankly, for needy families around the state. And then we were also able to coordinate with the state in terms of getting a lot of PPE out to the employees of our members. So those were pretty significant wins in a very challenging environment. Like Lucy, I think it was, that said, in terms of the work here, I really sincerely appreciate learning from other parts of the state and the challenges you guys are facing getting access to drinking water. So I appreciate the collaboration here and just learning more about what's going on. So thank you.
Wow, thank you. I'm in awe. Thanks for what you've done for a lot of the struggling families. So thank you for that. All right, so I'd like to return to Horacio, if it's possible. Horacio, are you able to unmute yourself? Okay, so I don't actually see Horacio in our attendee list. Unless I'm mistaken, let me do one final run through. Okay. All right, so Michael Claiborne, would you like to share?
Yes, good morning. Michael Claiborne with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. And I'm calling from, or on the Zoom line from Sacramento this morning. I think in terms of what I'm most proud of about our work in the last year, I'll echo Isabel a little bit. We all kind of learned together early on how to remain connected and make sure that our work continues to be informed by residents of communities that are impacted by drinking water contamination and other issues. And it was all new to us. I know it was new to a lot of the residents that we're working with. So I think I'm most proud that our work continues to be informed by impacted communities, despite the challenges of not being able to meet in person. I know it's kind of in some ways a small thing, but figuring out Zoom and how to make community meetings work virtually, I think is what I'm most proud of.
Thank you, Michael. All right. I do know that, let's see, give me 1 second. I know that some of our advisory group members had other pre-scheduled activities and will be joining us later. So Sergio, are you on the line? I do see you here. Would you like to share?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sergio Carranza. I'm with Pueblo Unido CDC. I'm actually participating from my office in La Quinta. If I think in retrospect, what has been probably one of the great achievements that we did for this year, I want to say that I'm very proud that in addition to continue the work and engagement with the community, we also engage into providing additional support through food distribution and mask and sanitation, distribution as well, so we can continue to provide more support and protection to our communities. We also have moved to train the community to engage into remote, meetings, so that the work has not stopped. So we were able to adapt to these pressing times that we are facing. So that's one of the things that I wanted to share with the group. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yes, we will not be defeated. All right. So Everett, is Everett on the line, and would Everett like to share? Okay, I actually am getting notice that Everett is not yet joined. So I did receive notice that Horacio has now joined. Horacio, are you able to unmute yourself and share?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry I'm late. I couldn't find the email for getting in until I got into the Safer website.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're right on time. So what we're doing here is we're sharing your name, your location, and then what you're most proud of for 2020.
My name is Horacio Mezquita, and I'm with the San Gerardo Cooperative here in Salinas, in the Salinas Valley. It's been hard this year with the coronavirus. We're just trying to keep the community safe. We close our office and just delivering packages to the residents, trying not to get in contact with people because in our county the virus is spreading out a lot with the farm workers. So we're just trying to be safe here and keep the community safe. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. We can only do our best, and I'm glad to hear from everyone on the call today that, you know, we're all trying as best as we can. Thank you, Horacio. Now that appears to wrap it up. I know some advisory group members could not be with us today, and I know other advisory group members have informed me that they will be joining us later. So I thank you all for participating in that warmer. You know, as I heard your responses, I just think it's amazing that even in the strangest of times, we are still coming together and we're still trying to make things happen. So thank you. Thank you so much. So what we're going to be doing now, next slide, please, is I'm going to be introducing our Executive Director of the Water Boards, Eileen Schilbeck, who will be providing an update on SAFER 2021 Advisory Group appointees. Welcome, Eileen.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So I thank you for that introduction very much. I'm Eileen Schilbeck. I'm the Executive Director for the State Water Boards. And today I have the privilege of announcing the appointment of the SAFER Advisory Group members who will be serving terms from 2021 to the end of 2022, so two full years. And I just want to remind everybody, I know that you all know that the SAFER Advisory Group provides a really essential role in giving input to the State Water Board on the development of the SAFER Expenditure Fund and other key SAFER initiatives and policies. And the Water Board is committed to transparent collaboration and community participation because that's essential to everything that we do and to make sure that viable solutions are implemented in our communities throughout the state, especially in those that are impacted by water challenges. And the SAFER Advisory Group is really key in providing that kind of input. And I really want to start, before I move to talking about who's going to have a new term, I really want to say how grateful I am, and I know all the state board members are, and all of our staff in the input that we've received from the advisory group during this first year. It's really important in the new program for leaders to set the tone of what an organization is going to do and how respected it's going to be. And I think that every single member of this advisory group in its first year has done an exemplary job of that. And I think that you all, through your efforts, have ensured that that the state board members themselves and all of our state board staff are going to listen to the to the advice and input that we received from this group. You've really set the bar high, and I really commend you, and I'm really grateful for your service. The way that the advisory council has been set up, advisory group has been set up, is to make sure that there is an opportunity for people to rotate off and new members to rotate on. We know that it is a big commitment. So for those of you who, where this will be your last meeting, thank you so much for your service. And we hope that you will remain involved in the water community in your individual or some other capacity. And for the new and continuing members, welcome. So I do want to move on and say that we received a large number of applicants to serve on the group, and that we've tried to balance membership among the different categories that were set up in the establishing legislation. And so I'm really thrilled with the amazingly diverse and capable group of people that we've come up with. And so let me please read you the name of the and the affiliations of the appointments. In the local agency category, we're going to be welcoming Jinmin Huang from the Yolo County Environmental Health Agency, Castillo Estrada from Coachella Valley Water District. In the NGO category, Emily Rooney from the Agricultural Council of California, and Michael Rincon from Physicians for Social Responsibility in Los Angeles. Oh, you have your own list. Very nice. In the public water system category, Michael Prado from Sultana Community Services District. In the technical assistance category, Jonathan Rash from the Indian Health Service. In the resident category, Sandra Chavez, who's a domestic well owner in Porterville, and Horacio Mezquita from San Gerardo Cooperative. And in the public category, Maria Munoz, a public water system resident. So congratulations, both new and continuing members of the advisory group. And I really look forward to working with you all and hearing what you have to say in the upcoming year. We've made progress on a lot of challenges, but new ones continue to confront us, including those that may be associated with the COVID pandemic and potential drought. So thank you very much for including me in this this part of your meeting, and I look forward to hearing about the rest of your meeting today. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Eileen. All right. So we're going to be jumping into our first goal of reviewing the progress made and review the goals we established in the fund expenditure plan. To kick us off, we have Jasmine Oaxaca, who will be providing an update on efforts of the Division of Financial Assistance. Jasmine, welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Itse. So for this fiscal year, 2020-21, we have about $492 million available to achieve the SAFER program goals this fiscal year for drinking water projects in small communities. These various funding sources make up the larger SAFER program. For capital and non-capital projects, there is $80 million from the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund. This is based on 3/4 of deposits being available to us, minus staff and implementation costs. $31 million from various general fund allocations, and $35 million from Proposition 68 groundwater. For capital projects only, there is $151 million available from drinking water bonds, $85 million from the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund grants, and $110 million from Proposition 1 groundwater. Next, please. The fund expenditure plan adopted in July 2020 established performance metrics through a few specific numeric goals. This slide shows our past year's accomplishments new goals, and how we're doing so far in the new fiscal year. Our goals are to provide interim solutions to 150 communities and schools, have executed or completed planning assistance projects to 150 communities, and completed long-term solutions to 100 communities. As our new interim water agreements and technical assistance agreements are executed, we expect these numbers to improve significantly in the coming months. Next, please. The fund expenditure plan also established a few numeric targets for the short and long term as part of the stated narrative goals. This slide provides a glimpse of how work is progressing towards those goals related to funding. A few to mention here are that 107 out of 186 systems with chronic maximum contaminant level violations are implementing at least one solution. 30 out of 186 systems with chronic maximum contaminant level violations have long-term solutions underway. There are 59 households that are benefiting from non-bottled water interim solutions. And due to some issues with accessing funds from the fiscal year 2020-21 Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund, we have yet to encumber any of those funds. We do hope to get those issues resolved soon, as we already have identified several projects for this fiscal year. Next, please. Some other items that we've been working on towards implementation of the fund expenditure plan and its goals include evaluating our queue of incoming projects and matching them with appropriate SAFER program funds. We have been taking a closer look at our funding process, improvements we have already implemented, and ideas for potential improvements at all stages of a project. I'll talk more about that later today. We have started discussions with the EJ groups on how we can implement interim solutions to systems that are out of compliance and potentially at risk. And we are expanding the range of services offered by our technical assistance providers through some of our new TA agreements made possible by SB 200. I will now pass the presentation on to our colleagues in the Division of Drinking Water.
Thank you, Jasmine. My name is Michelle Frederick, and I am with the SAFER section of the Division of Drinking Water. Can I get the next slide, please? So just an update on sort of what we've been working on with the needs assessment development. Just recapping our October 2020 efforts, we did a webinar selecting risk indicators, and UNC financial did a webinar on UNC's financial capacity dashboards, which was a pilot study that we are working on. We are seeking public feedback on that. So if you haven't seen that, we'll talk about it a little bit more later. But if you haven't had a chance, we really encourage you to go look at that and give us some public feedback. In November 2020, we also did an estimate on our cost estimate methodology, and we are seeking public comment until December 20th on that white paper and the webinar that was around that, sort of focusing on how we do sustainability and resiliency of our solutions, and then also the cost estimate methodology. And then on Monday, we will be doing another webinar on determining how we do our scoring and weighting approach for at-risk water systems. So that's December 14th. So we hope you all can join us. We'll also be talking at that meeting and webinar about discussing the expansion of the human right to water criteria to include beyond sort of chemical MCLs and including things other like bacteriological MCLs and things like that. And then we're hoping we'll be taking feedback through early January on that piece of it, the weighting and scoring approach. And then in January of 2021, we will really be sort of working with UCLA to crunch the numbers and really digging into finalizing all the public feedback that we've gotten and actually conducting the risk assessment, the cost assessment, and then going forward with the affordability assessment. And probably in February of 2021, probably towards the end, we'll also be having a webinar, tentatively holding February 26th as a date, but not certain on that yet. But so the next slide is on our University of North Carolina's Environmental Finance Center. So I think it's important, this focuses on water systems that are between 500 and 3,300 connections. And it's an opportunity for water systems to go in and look at where their rates are relative to others and their system performance. Just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that this is available. There's a bunch of different options on comparing water rates and comparing affordability and cost recovery. So please take a look at that if you haven't yet. Next slide. And then also with the administrators, we have really gone full bore on those. We had a public meeting on Monday night. We have one tonight as well. We've started down the pathway for 10 different administrator projects to date. There's the Administrator Policy Handbook. There's an Administrator FAQ. And we've also now got RFQ for administrators, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. So we are requesting qualifications for administrators. We are hoping to create a pool of administrators that we can reach out to across the state. People that have water system managerial experience, experience working with disadvantaged communities or culturally diverse communities, and then other skills that they may bring to the table that would be specific and that we would call out to for a specific water system. So we're looking forward to seeing hopefully a lot of applicants for that. Next slide. And then consolidations from July 1st to 2020 to the present. So we have about 11 so far that are on the docket, and here's sort of a list of those. We also, typically we see the results of consolidations coming in this time of the year. So we're hoping that there'll be several other ones that come in soon as well. Usually it's related to the summer construction season, and then we start to see them coming through now. So next slide. And with that, I will pass it over to our Office of Public Participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I would like to now introduce Jessica Bean, who will provide an update on efforts that have been made by the Office of Public Participation. Welcome, Jessica.
Thanks, Itze. Hi, everyone. So I wanted to just give you a really brief update on some of our safer community engagement efforts for 2020. Just let you know the metric number 8 in our fund expenditure plan says that we're going to track community engagement, engagement effectiveness of the program. So to do that in a numeric way, we're tracking the 4 different items listed in the table here, which are the number of public meetings and webinars we've hosted, the number of community presentations we've given, the number of presentations we have given to our board, as well as the number of water solutions meetings we held in local communities. And those water solutions meetings are referring to things like very local consolidation meetings or meetings on potential administrators. So we're also tracking the attendance of these meetings, which is listed here as well. So the public meetings and workshop include things like these advisory group meetings, the Q&A sessions that we have usually after the meetings, and then other related drinking water or funding webinars like the risk assessment, the financial dashboard, aquifer risk mapping. These are all webinars that we've had this year, and they're all accounted for in these numbers. So just to let you know, the community presentations are given by water board staff to non-governmental organizations, advocacy groups, the IRWM, the groups, local agencies like GSAs, kind of across the board when folks want information on SAFER. And then again, like I said, the water solutions meetings are the public meetings that we're holding in specific communities for topics like administrators or consolidations. Next slide, please. So just to go into a little bit more detail about what the community engagement process looks like specifically for those water solutions meetings, because we've had some questions related to that. Essentially, once the decision is made to move forward with one of these solutions, the board sends a letter to the system and community members to kick off the public engagement portion of the process. And this letter announces our plans for a public hearing that we hold specifically in the community, where residents can learn what the water issues are and how the board is proposing to find solutions for those issues. So this is an opportunity for residents to ask questions and provide feedback at the hearing. So if you're not necessarily hearing a lot about these specific meetings, it is because they're very targeted. So we are looking to really engage with the people in the community, and we're spending our time navigating through that. So we're using local media to do that, some social networks, social media, excuse me, those types of things to really make sure that we're connecting with the right groups. We connect with technical assistance providers in the area, and then we also look for community leaders that can help us get in touch with those groups. And if folks are interested in seeing kind of the process and the progress of where we are on those very specific community meetings, we have on our administrator website and our consolidation website, we have a list of that type of information that you can follow up on. So just to kind of follow up on that a little bit more, in the case of, for example, an administrator meeting, the hearing is an opportunity for residents to also learn who the proposed administrator is and what their qualifications are. And that's an opportunity for residents to ask questions and provide feedback or concerns that they might have about the proposed administrator. So we are definitely looking to work within the communities to make sure that people can ask their questions and provide their feedback and be a part of that solution. So typically we've been having those meetings in the past, we've had those in person, but obviously with the current emergency situation, everything is being held remotely. So for those virtual meetings, we do offer both an online internet option as well as a call-in option. So for folks who don't have access to the internet, they can call into those meetings. And then we've also, as we do for our advisory group meetings, if the community needs any sort of translation services, that's something that we can make sure that we provide. So as a reminder from the previous slide, in the past few months, we've only had a few of these community meetings in 2020, but we do anticipate having quite a few more going into 2021. So in addition to that, we've completed many outreach materials, and we've also been working on our SAFER website during 2020, just to make sure that folks statewide have access to information. And we do intend on refining both the website and our materials based on community needs going forward next year. And as you know from the announcement today, we completed our latest advisory group application process. And so we have this new cohort for 2021. And we believe that, or excuse me, because we were able to be more intentional with our outreach this year in 2020, we received a wider range of applicants. We were pretty excited that we had not only a larger number of applications, but we also had a much larger geographic diversity in where our applicants were coming from and a larger number of community residents who applied. So we're really excited about that. And then just to wrap things up in terms of tribal outreach, there are 7 tribal water systems that are currently out of compliance. We are actively engaging with 2 of these systems, and we'll continue to coordinate with both the US EPA and the Bureau of Indian Affairs on engagement with these systems and other systems that need assistance next year. Next slide. Great. So the last thing that I'm going to touch on is just our timeline and key milestones for 2021. So now that we have a full year under our belt for SAFER, we have a good idea of what needs to happen each quarter. And there's a bit of a pattern that we're looking to, and that will pretty much be the same as we go forward each year. So if you take a look here at this 2021 SAFER timeline, it's divided into quarters. The first quarter, we're going to see the final needs analysis and learn how it will inform the upcoming fund expenditure plan that we do each year. And then in the second quarter, we will have a draft fund expenditure plan for the SAFER advisory group and members of the public to review and provide feedback on. And then in the third quarter, the board will consider adopting the plan, and then we will be launching our advisory group application process again. And then finally, in the fourth quarter, we will see where the needs analysis is for the next year. We'll be able to summarize our metrics and lessons learned, kind of like we're doing today. And then we'll be announcing the advisory group members for the upcoming year. So again, this is just really a little snapshot of what you can anticipate for the 2021 SAFER timeline. And that's all I have, you'd say.
Thanks, Jessica. All right. So I thank everyone for their presentations. Before we go into question and answer or feedback, I just want to remind those on the Zoom that if you hover towards the top of your Zoom platform, you're going to see view options. So when you click down on view options, you'll see who's sharing their screen, and you can select the PowerPoint and the language in which you'd like to see it. So there's a Spanish PowerPoint and an English PowerPoint. I just wanted to bring that back up in case you were looking at a screen that you didn't particularly want to see. So with that, are there any questions, comments, feedback that anyone would like to share with us? If so, okay, I see hands raised. I'm going to try my best to keep them in the order that I see. So Michael, I see your hand up and I've asked that you unmute yourself. Go ahead and share.
Yeah, just a quick clarifying question. The list of appointments and reappointments to the advisory group, that didn't include advisory group members on 2-year terms. Is that right?
Let me go ahead and verify. Jessica, would you like to chime in on that?
I apologize. I'm not looking at it right in front of me. I think it's just the new members is what was posted there, Michael. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Yes, we have just received confirmation on that. So yes, it was just the newly appointed.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Does anyone else have any questions, comments? I'm not seeing any hands up.
I'd say my hand's up.
Oh, I apologize. Go ahead, Camille. Sometimes there are so many attendees that I can't, but go ahead.
No worries. So I had a quick question about the change in numbers for the 2021 year, I guess. One sec, sorry, let me go back up. So for the 2019-20 year, the accomplishments listed 67 systems who had achieved a long-term solution, and that the goal for 2020, 2021 was 100, and so far 1/3 have been reached. Could folks provide any additional information on kind of the pace and whether we're on target to meet the 2020-2021 goal, and if not, what the barriers have been?
Great question, Camille. Would any of our State Water Board staff like to answer Camille's question? Hello, Michelle. Are you still on the line?
I am. Camille, can you rephrase that again? I'm not sure I got the whole question.
Sure. I was looking at the goal for this fiscal year, and it said that there was a goal of reaching 100 systems to provide a long-term solution. But so far, we're about halfway through the year, and it looks like there's 36 systems that have received assistance. So I was wondering if we're on track for the goal, like if you see there being more systems in the coming or the latter half of the year, and if not, if there have been some barriers that you can share with us about whether or not it's been difficult to get funding out, or if you're having other issues as staff to be able to reach that goal of 100 systems.
Well, I think that I think that to some extent I want to punt that to Jasmine around the funding piece of it, because I do know that they have had some difficulty accessing some of the SAFER funds. But, you know, what I do see is, you know, how we define long-term solutions. I do see a lot of our, you know, we every month we have a DDW DFA meeting, and we go through each of our systems to make sure that we are seeing progress. And I do see, you know, I mean, when we do these meetings, I am in a lot of ways focused on the consolidations, but we are looking at the whole bandwidth of work there as well. And, you know, it does take a lot of time to get people a solution. Lots of times we'll see a solution that they anticipated going forward. You know, maybe they were going to drill a well, and then when they drill the well, there's some sort of problem. The water quality wasn't what they had hoped. And so then we have to come back and find a different solution. Or, you know, sometimes the consolidation agreements are going forward, but then, you know, they're concerned about making sure that the funding piece is in place before they sign it. So there's a lot of different pieces that I think go into that. I do think we are really seeing a lot of progress, though, that said. And I think I think when you look at the individual systems one by one, that's where you see the progress, as opposed to sort of the aggregated data. And I think that's one thing we're hoping to do too, is I know internally we're working to start sort of creating more clear milestones on where they are, you know, and tracking that, so that then we can say there was this barrier in a planning process, or there was this type of barrier, so that we can start to see where we're seeing clusters of those and create a pathway forward to get over and around those. Did that help, Camille?
Yes, thank you.
And then Jasmine, I don't know if you wanted to talk about you guys' side in terms of funding.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. This is Joe. I'll go ahead and respond. Yeah, so we're hopeful that we can meet those numbers, and we're doing everything we can. Obviously, just to keep in mind that when we developed those numbers, that was right around when the COVID hit, and we were all thinking, oh, this will be a couple of months, and it's turned into many, many months. So, but we're still moving forward and doing best we can. We certainly have a lot of projects in the pipeline, the funding pipeline. So, you know, I'm optimistic that we can get those through. And Jasmine, I think, mentioned earlier that we have a number of agreements that we're just finalizing now for new technical assistance agreements that should help move things along quite a bit. So it's certainly something we're, you know, definitely still have our eye on meeting those goals. It will definitely be a struggle given all of the challenges that we have.
Thanks, Joe. So as a reminder, I just wanted to advise that the current Q&A session is for current advisory group members. So the next advisory group member that I see with their hand up is Horacio. Would you like to share your question, comment?
Yes, I just wanted to know if any of the accomplishments have been done with domestic wells or estate small, or any affordability, because I don't know if you guys are already implementing those systems in the accomplishments or in the planning. Any idea?
Hi, Horacio. Sorry, Joe. So we are currently assisting some domestic wells through some of our interim solution programs, for example, in Tulare County and the Central Valley County. But we're also, just executing some of our agreements that will allow us to do more of that. So I do expect those numbers to increase in the coming months.
What about state smalls? Are you also working on those?
We've had discussions about how to assist some state smalls, but we have not started doing that yet. And again, those should be part of some of our new agreements that are just being executed.
Are we going to be working with the affordability soon, or is there already been done some work on that?
Jasmine, do you want me to take that?
Yes, please. Sure,
Sure.
Michelle.
So I just would say we are doing some state small consolidation projects that are part of bigger consolidation projects. I know we have one in Monterey. I know that we've also, our engagement group has been doing some work with some domestic wells down in San Diego area, but also near Lake Baldwin. We've been working on some issues down there. So I wouldn't say that we haven't done anything around state smalls and domestic wells, but sort of the programmatic, sort of the bigger programmatic pieces I think are still coming. Around affordability, we anticipate this year that the needs analysis will be expanded, and we will be doing a lot more outreach about affordability. We've been focusing on getting the cost methodology, getting the at-risk list, expanding the human right to water. For this next year, we have already planned to do outreach and webinars and things around affordability to really try and hone in how we're going to define that and what that's going to entail going forward. So, Horacio, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Horacio. I do see that, Sergio, you have your hand up, and I'd just like to say that we will take our final comment from Sergio. So go ahead.
Thank you. I believe overall this presentation provides a really good status of how everything is moving in the different aspects of this SB 200 program. However, I think it's also vital, and I want to build on the comment made by, I think it was Jesse, about what specific issues are we finding while we're trying to implement this program. That is on the planning process, that is on the work plan, that is on some kind of where do we submit an application for specific projects. So I believe the idea of clustering these challenges of obstacles through this group, and I don't know specifically in what space need to be discussed, where we're actually even having administrative issues, are we having legislative issues that probably the program are not adapting to the needs of the community. Those need to be defined so we can actually tackle those, so that we can report in upcoming meetings to say, well, we identify these following issues that are categorized in this different, way, and this is how we are resolving those. So the idea is how to expedite the process from planning and grant agreement and implementation, so we can actually have a really good metric to say it's moving along, we are resolving these issues. I think that is the specific information we're missing here, because we don't know what kind of specific barriers, and there are many still, that we need to resolve as a group.
Thank you, Sergio. I appreciate your comment. It is being noted, and we do appreciate your thoughts. All right, so I'd like now to pass it to my colleague. So I'm introducing Haiti with the Office of Public Participation. Welcome.
Thanks, Itze. Hi, everyone. I'm Haiti Yanamine with the Office of Public Participation. Today's breakout session is quite different than the last few you may have been a part of. Today, we will be hearing from some of our advisory group members as they share a safe drinking water story from their experience. The advisory group members are recognized experts in their field, and by hearing their stories today, we can learn from their actions, learn how to navigate barriers, and continue our collective efforts in achieving safe and affordable drinking water for all Californians. Before we jump into the breakout group discussions, I'd like to go over some instructions. Our goal is to engage with advisory group member stories to gather lessons learned and best practices that can be applied to improve safer funded drinking water projects. All right, some instructions for the breakout room. Folks will be placed in breakout rooms with an advisory group member that has agreed to share their safe drinking water story. Advisory group member will share their screen to display the presentation and present their story in 15 minutes. Each breakout session will be recorded. Other advisory group members in the breakout room will engage in discussion and ask questions. So let's jump into our breakout rooms. In just a few, you will be placed in the breakout group with folks from the water boards, including a team member from the Office of Public Participation who will be there to facilitate. The facilitator in your breakout group will call an advisory group member to report out to the larger group at the end of our breakout session. If you do not enter a breakout group or if you get disconnected, please try to reconnect. If you are still having trouble, please contact us via email at safer@waterboards.ca.gov. So we'll be starting the breakout rooms in a few seconds. If you can join us by clicking in the notification pop-up. All right. So see you in the break rooms.
SAFER grant recipients, and they are the Thermal Mutual Water Company, the Westside Elementary School, and the Oasis Gardens Mobile Home Park. The way we did these projects, we combined them into one grant application, one contract, for a number of reasons, and we'll get into that. One of the things that I wanted to kind of show just for information purposes, so that perhaps we start thinking about, improvements or lessons learned, is that it took us over 3 years to get through the grant application process, but it's only going to take us 4 months to complete the construction for all these 3 projects. So something that I think is important to highlight. And so the question really is, well, why? Why did it take over 3 years for a construction that would only take 4 months? And we were new. I think as you get into this more and more, you start understanding the process more and more. And I think we've gone through that phase. And so one of the things that I think we learned is that communication is important between the agency, the applicant, and the state, the funding agency. And it's also important to have communication with the recipient of the grant, in this case, the school. One of the things that happened here is the application started as a project that included on-site, off-site work, and then the school, for some emergency reasons, went ahead and did some of the on-site work, and it completely threw off the application. We had received some word from the state that it disqualified the application, and so we had to communicate to make sure that we requalified, and so we were able to show information that showed that this was emergency work, and then we had to break out the remaining work to basically start all over again. So things of that nature are important. For some reason, perhaps the school wasn't aware that the on-site was part of the application, and if they went forward, it completely changed the project. Some of the other things that we kind of learned along the way is the environmental component of the project. I think we've asked various questions to, even within this group, to the state staff about, do you use this bucket of funding? Do you use this bucket of funding? Do you use this other bucket of funding? I think we saw during today's kind of overview of the funding availability that there's funding that comes from various buckets, and depending on where that comes from, it triggers certain CEQA requirements. And so when we first started, we were under the impression that we didn't need CEQA Plus, but then perhaps maybe that funding was depleted, and then we were perhaps being slated in a different bucket, but now we're required CEQA Plus, so we had to go back and redo the environmental package. And then perhaps the SAFER program came in, which is all state money, and then you didn't really need to. So one of the things that I think we take away from that is it's probably better to just do full CEQA, so that, once you do full CEQA, you have the possibility of being placed wherever the funding comes from. So I think that's something that we're going to do moving forward. A little bit about let me move this here. So this is the Thermal Mutual Water Company consolidation. We're consolidating 38 residential properties. The system's about over 50 years old. The well's failing. It has outages of 12 hours. One of the things is you have to really communicate with the homeowners, because you're going to access their property once you install the meter and go from the meter to their point of connection at the house. So we had an idea here, I think, because the funding didn't pencil out. Because I think we try to hit, I think the state tries to hit this cost per connection of $30,000 per service connection. And so when you look at specific projects, sometimes that doesn't pencil out, but you'll see that in another project right now, the Oasis, all it took was a little bit of construction to consolidate a large amount of units. And so if you blend the projects, it does pencil out as you blend several projects. This is the Thermal Mutual Water Company area, the community here. You can see that it's basically the community that is north of those yellow lines, that's their well there. It's pretty old. And you can see the project's pretty simple. We just, put a line on those two roads and then consolidate those homes with individual meters. The Westside Elementary School Consolidation Project, that's a school that serves about 500 disadvantaged K through 6 students in the community of Thermal. The on-site well had no redundancy. It didn't have any backup power, and it also lacked fire protection. Again, the issue with this one was it included the on-site work. However, Westside moved on doing some of the on-site work because it needed to do some sewer work, and it basically put the application at risk. There was a tremendous amount of work that had to be done to restart the application and parse out the portions of the project that were originally included in the application, and a lot of communication with the state as it related to why we needed to make those modifications. So that was, some of the lessons learned. And that's kind of what it says there. That's Westside Elementary School. You can see that we have the construction sign there. The Oasis Garden, a lot of units, connects 160 mobile homes to our system. And all we basically did was install 125 feet of pipe, a backflow and a hydrant. And so you could see that was the connection that we needed to make, 125 feet of pipe to consolidate 160 units. And so we worked with the state to blend these projects so that the financials would pencil out, understanding that perhaps this was a very small cost to consolidate a lot of units. One of the other things that we've done that perhaps has been helpful for us to move projects is we've really put a master plan in place that has analyzed over 80 small water systems. We've prioritized them based on water quality, on distance to existing infrastructure, and a lot of other different criteria. And so we have a master plan that we can basically take projects from that master plan and start executing those projects as funding becomes available. A lot of these systems have elevated levels of arsenic, nitrates, and fluoride. Again, here's a quick map of an overview of those systems. Everywhere you see names is the name of that small water system. So you can see how congested this area is with names. There's over 83 small water systems in this area. Here are some of the barriers to consolidating these projects. Some of them I just mentioned, but I think the first one is not necessarily a barrier, but it's more of an opportunity to elevate the need or the importance or the priority of a project. I think that if we as a community, as a state, as a county feel that there is a system out there that perhaps needs to be on the top of the list, I would say that compliance orders and violation reports really help us make the case that those systems should be on top of the list. So that's more of a potential opportunity, I think. The other thing is that it's expensive to connect systems due to the distance from our existing infrastructure. And one of the things that, and I think that's what we're trying to figure out on this expenditure or this cost analysis that we're working on, is how do we manage that, right? And is the cost per connection a limitation? And I know that there's different ways that you can pencil out the project if you can show that perhaps what you're building is perhaps the backbone to being able to consolidate more systems that would then have a less cost associated with them. So just something to think about as it relates to a cost per connection. Sometimes these systems are pretty far, but as you're building the backbone, the next systems in line are only become less expensive. There's minimal information about these systems, so that sometimes adds complexity to the project. It adds cost, it adds time. Another thing is the funding is limited, it's competitive, and sometimes very specific. So I think for applicants, it's important to thoroughly understand the grant opportunities to be successful. It's really important that people know how to navigate the process, and it requires a lot of staff time and consultant time. So Again, it's a complex process, and it's sometimes difficult to navigate. So really having someone on your team that understands some of this goes a long ways. Some areas of improvement, I think what we did here is we kind of parsed it out between maybe some pointers from our perspective that we could have some help from, perhaps when the state has things to do, and then the applicant has things to do. So this is more for the state, streamline. I think what we recognize is that even at some point, the application leaves the state water board department or staff, and it goes to perhaps the controller's office. It goes perhaps to a legal consultation, and then that's sometimes where it gets stuck. And so if there's a way to think about how we could better improve those internal processes that are perhaps even beyond the water board, that's something that I think could help the process. And consider the impact of requirements. For example, the west side situation where the on-site emergency work had the potential to disqualify the project. Some tips for applicants. This is for the applicants. It's good to have support from your board. It's good to have support from your elected officials, your stakeholders. And I think what it does, it really just elevates the need, and it allows for projects to move along, for resources to be made available from the agencies, and from a lot of times from a bigger group, that the more energy you put into it, the more you can really develop projects and really make them real. You need to plan ahead, make a realistic timeline. Usually these applications, they take about a year. It's important that you understand the funding availability, the environmental approvals, and the application process. You have to conduct outreach with the water system early on to establish relationship and a set of expectations. I think one of the things that this does is that sometimes knowing that this process takes time, if you don't communicate with the community that, hey, this is a 2-year project, a 3-year project, perhaps a 4 or 5-year project, you find yourself that you begin to lose trust from the community, and then sometimes they lack interest. So I think it's important that you kind of form those real expectations up front. And a big one, never start construction before the grant is approved. Otherwise, you might find yourself in some trouble. A big one right here, state water staff and the board are there to help. So it's important that you communicate with your project managers constantly. Project managers will review even before you have everything complete to help you. We've had a lot of success because of that, because we communicate with our project managers. We let them know any issues that we might be facing. We ask for guidance. We ask for advice. And if they have to ask their management, they always communicate back. And so it's very important to constantly communicate with your project manager so that everybody's on the same page. Again, don't risk the minimal environmental work. Just do full CEQA. That way you have more flexibility. You give more flexibility to the water staff as to where to place your project, and without necessarily being at risk of having to come back and do some additional revisions to your application when you think that you perhaps have been you've completed that process. And again, ask questions. Just ask questions. Perhaps at the beginning we had misunderstandings. What were the requirements, and so it's just good to communicate. And that's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Castulo. Very insightful, very thorough presentation. Thank you for that. So before we jump into the Q&A, I just want to share some updates with you all. So we are broadcasting publicly on the Cali PA webpage, and I am also recording this session. So just as an FYI, if you'd like to stop sharing your video, you can, that's all right. And then we will, let's see. And then the other update, so for the reporter of this group, just as an FYI, when we go back to the big group, you'll be sharing some of our group's kind of top takeaways or top points, some areas of consensus or conflict that we might have had in talking about the presentation, and then just sharing any feedback or lingering questions that came up. So thank you again, Emily, for reporting for us. And David, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to say something really quickly? No?
Okay, I'm trying to figure out if you solved my audio problems. Can you hear me now? Because I had to log off and log back on, and so I was gone. So I'm working now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Okay, thanks.
Great. All right. So with that, I think we will hop into Q&A. So I have some questions here to ask, but I do just kind of want to start off. Yeah, I have a couple questions here to ask. So, and we have a little over half an hour to get through these questions. So we'll start with these questions, and then at the end, we'll get to sort of just a broad-based like Q&A if we have anything else to ask or to share. So to start off, let's kind of jump into points here that Castelo, I think you did share in your PowerPoint, but just some points maybe, Castelo, that you want to highlight for us again about what went well with this particular project or story. So if you want us to capture any particular notes on this, like let us know, but we do want to, I think that's our first question, sort of what went well, what were good things that happened during this project?
I'll say that what went well was we were always in communication with the state. We were always in communication with the community. So getting the community on board, I think, was fairly simple. And I would say that once you get the money to do the project, it seems like everything just kind of, there is no other issues. It's really the application process that's perhaps the most difficult. But I think that we were successful in always communicating with our project manager and coming up with solutions. They were always very responsive. And I think we do understand that, we have a better sense of understanding how the process works because of that communication to where I think in the next opportunities that we might have, it's only going to be better. But it's because they do provide the insight, even as it relates to how projects are funded. I think we've learned a lot. So I would say communication. I think we've had a lot of communication.
Great, thanks for sharing that. Does anyone have any
But
questions?
I think it said, I think I'm going to say this. I think it's also important that the applicant asks the questions. If you're not engaging, you're not going to get responses. So I think that we, as staff at the water district, we were asking questions, and so that's been really helpful for us.
Great, thank you for that, Castelo. Thank you for that nuance too at the end there. So I'll bring it out to our larger breakout group now. Does anyone have any questions about some of the things that Castelo shared about, in particular, what went well with this project? Don't be shy.
I will jump out and just say that I think Coachella Valley has shown such leadership, and I think that's part of the reason that it has gone so well. And so, your vision for including lots of other water systems, your vision to take care of your community at large, at least from DDW's perspective, has been very impressive and engaging and heartwarming. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I thought, Castelo, I don't know that you mentioned when you formed your DAC committee. When was that?
We started talking about it in 2014,
right?
And But at first it was just me meeting with them.
Right.
And then we kind of took it to the rest of, we kind of bridged the whole agency in around 2016. And that created a lot of the support.
Right. Yeah, and I think if I remember right, you're kind of ahead of the curve in terms of there aren't a lot of other regions or large districts that have done that sort of engagement and then took advantage, I think, of IRWM funding, if I remember correctly, to do your master planning. So I think just like Michelle was saying, I think those are things that are unique and really went well. I mean, to have a large agency willing to take a leadership role where there's not any great benefit to you all to add those communities, right? And I'm sure that was part of the struggle of your board too, right? Is like, well, why should we take on these what could seem like a burden when you probably have your hands full already?
And I agree, Joe. I think I think that was a good thing, and that's what it's allowed us to kind of move the way we've moved on these projects, is that the board has decided to invest resources, invest staff time to pursue these type of projects, and it's become almost as part of our strategic goals. And so it's something that the agency believes in. It's part of our culture now, and we are fully committed to it. And I think that that goes a long ways, and we really want to understand the process. And I think that that's why we ask the questions that we ask, and we're very happy to be able to form the partnership that we formed with the state to kind of understand all the nuances and just make us better in the future.
Yes, another question I had, maybe it's both, things that you struggled with and maybe are going better now, is just, when you're communicating with these small communities who, in many cases, maybe you're trying to work with a mobile home park owner that might be challenging to work with, right? They may not even be providing adequate housing, let alone water and sewer service and that sort of thing. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how that is going, or what you've learned in terms of how do you deal, it's like, how do you deal with difficult people kind of thing almost, it's like, because it's super challenging in this kind of context, right? Where people aren't getting good drinking water, but really there's probably an owner that maybe is present, maybe isn't. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about that and where you feel like you've had some success.
I don't think that we've ran into too many situations where we have an unwilling participant. I think for the most part, I would say almost all the systems that we've identified perhaps have shown a level of commitment. One of the criteria that we analyzed as part of our matrix of priority was complexity of execution of executing the project or putting the project together, which also included like right-of-way issues because they were on tribal land, even an assessment of willingness to connect or provide a consolidation agreement or letter. So all of that has been ranked, and understanding that there's issues sometimes with these mobile home parks that might have other issues beyond water because of housing elements or setbacks or safety issues, and understanding that perhaps we would be blocked by Riverside County, who's the land management agency that issues permits. We unfortunately had to focus the plan on systems that were permitted. So the 83 systems that we are focused on are systems that we have buy-in from the county as systems that they would fully issue permits for these type of connections. I believe there's about another 30. So in reality, there's about over 100 systems, but those 30 are not part of this plan, just because there's still unresolved issues that we don't. There's plenty of work on the stuff that we can do that we didn't feel like it was necessary for us to start to try to fix those issues there.
And Emily, I think you're raising your hand, but you can go ahead and speak.
Yeah, thank you. Costello, this might be sort of an oversimplified question, but can you quantify for us sort of the remainder of your master plan and what that looks like in terms of scope, timelines, scope of project, that sort of thing? And then as part of that, you just brought up this issue with the county's permitting process. Have you tried to reach out to them in terms of trying to get them engaged in your master plan? I think it's just such a smart approach because you'll be able to realize efficiencies as you unfold projects, right? And in terms of helping build out the system. So any comments on that?
My light just went off.
That happens in my office too.
The County of Riverside staff and the supervisor's office have been engaged on this task force pretty much from the beginning, and the master plan was a result of a lot of the information that they provided as it related to the systems that are within communities that are permitted, that they felt would not have any issues for consolidation as they permitted. So that was kind of, the master plan was a collaboration with Riverside County just to ensure that if we ever got funding for projects, we wouldn't have any other issues. In terms of the kind of quantifying where we're at with the master plan, these three projects are not in the master plan because they were projects that were already in the queue when we were kind of finalizing the master plan. So right now we're working, I think, to try to do the first batch of those projects. And so I know that at least we've started an application process for the top 2 ranking projects to try to get construction funding for those 2 projects. In terms of cost associated with the projects, our kind of rough calculation has been that we need around $80 million to consolidate these 83 small water systems. And we've really put them together in about 42 projects. So one project consolidating anywhere from like 1 to 12 systems. And so that's kind of like a big overview of the plan. Now, the other thing that's interesting is there are systems within our plan that weren't captured because they don't exist in the data. We have about 5 tribal nations within our water district, and of course they have their own regulatory process, and the county doesn't have information on them. The state doesn't really have information on them. But for example, we just learned that there's a big issue there in what they call the Oasis mobile home park that's on tribal land. That project there without the Oasis was ranked number 3. I think if it would have been ranked, I think if we would have included the Oasis issue, it would have ranked number 1. But unfortunately, as we gathered the data, it wasn't an input. So we were blind to it. But that is something that is on the radar. But again, that just adds another layer of complexity, because I think that is the instance, Joe, Michelle, where we do run sometimes into an unwilling participant. And then that becomes the issue, because there's no enforcement action really that you could take to force them into doing something. So I think that's been the struggle for us, is really when we have to deal with communities within tribal nations.
Can I ask too, I'm just curious how you were able to get sort of your board and your management to really buy in on this, because I do think that piece, everyone is so tapped in cities and counties. There's COVID and there's fires, and there's so many things that people continuously are up against that I think Joe spoke to. How do you get the cities or the counties or the larger agencies invested in it. Because I do think once you get invested, like you see the real potential, but that's hard to do initially.
I think that the state made the conversation easy. The state's vision was already kind of making the argument for it, but then the problem is, do the local agencies really decide to, put an emphasis or allocate resources? Because you could have all the funding available at the state, but if the agency doesn't have a priority to go after those funding opportunities, they won't ever go after them. So it's really convincing the agency that it's something that you want to do, right? And so I think that the state made it easy to where you could point to the state and say, well, look, the state's making these funding sources available. Here's the goal of California. And then it was also important, I think, for us, and it was easy for us because our assembly member came from this area, so it was easy for the assembly member to talk about it. Our supervisor came out of this area, so it's easy for the supervisor to talk about it. It's easy for the supervisor to do what he needs to do with the staff to make things more streamlined if possible. It's easy for the assembly member to, buy into the idea. And then also there's a lot of nonprofit activity like Sergio with Pueblo Unido. He's been around for 20 years. We have other folks that have been around that have been kind of beating on the drum. So kind of all that kind of coming collectively, and then someone, on the board saying, hey, there's all these people that are saying the same thing. It just kind of, you can't ignore it anymore. You can't really ignore it. And I think what we've, that's what we've done. We've kind of put it in, we've elevated the issue by talking about it, by talking about it anywhere that we could, by talking about it in the media, and everybody kind of doing the same, the assembly member doing the same, the supervisor doing the same. And then it's like, okay, well, we need to do something here. So I think that's how it kind of happened.
Yeah, thank you. That's really informative.
Yeah, these are great questions, everyone. And thank you, Costello, for being on the hot seat. So we have about 12 minutes left. And David, I want to see if you had any questions that you wanted to bring up or any points. I saw you were unmuted earlier, but I just wanted to give you this chance if you had anything you'd like to add.
I didn't really have any questions. I just appreciated the presentation and sort of the thoroughness of what you presented and sort of the scope and of the projects that you implemented. I mean, it's impressive amount of work you did there. So, and thank you for presenting it.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's our staff. Our staff is wonderful, and I give them all the kudos. They put a lot of effort into this, and I'm really happy about that. And also our board, we don't, our board, I think is a good board. We can't know everything, but I think we trust each other that we know what we talk about. We have some board members that are farmers, and if they say that certain things are important for the farming community, I tend to say, you know what, I agree with you. I believe you. And so I think, it's the same thing with us when, I represent this area. I lived in this area. My family lives here, and I say, hey, these are real issues. Our board says they must be real issues. So I'm really happy that we got to this point.
So I had another question.
Go for it, Joe.
Thanks. So Costello, you mentioned something regarding doing the CEQA Plus, and for those like Emily or David, I don't know if you know what that means, but it's basically satisfying some federal environmental requirements so that, and it's one of those things that we initially were having everybody who came in our door go ahead and meet those federal requirements because you don't know what the color of the money is that you're going to receive. But one of the things that we did recently, at least that applies through the end of June 2021, is anybody that's going through our process now we are essentially waiving those federal environmental crosscutters. It's kind of nuanced and particular, but even when we're using federal money in some cases for like the small DACs, as long as we're satisfying enough of those federal requirements with other projects, for these small DAC projects, we don't have to do that additional work. And it was one of those things that we saw as a like a barrier, because and you went through this, is that, if we have to do a consultation with the Fish and Wildlife Service, we're going through the US EPA to do that consultation. That can take a long time. And then also, if we have to go, do cultural resource assessment and that sort of thing, things beyond what we would normally just do with CEQA, it adds all these other entities that need to be, become part of the process. And in some cases, like you were pointing out, is that really necessary, right? When you're, say, using existing right-of-ways and that sort of thing. So anyway, I'm just wondering, like, would you have a different opinion if that kind of policy were solidified, where you could rely on it, let's say? I'm just throwing that out, policy where you don't need to do those federal environmental crosscutters in order to still qualify for funding for small DAC water projects.
Yeah, I think so. And I've heard some comment. I'm not too familiar how it works, but I just recently heard that there's some waivers that you could get if you're a D8, like a severely disadvantaged community, or maybe just a DAC. Where it expedites your environmental review process. I guess you don't have to do the SHPO or something. I forget what it's called.
Yeah. So there are a couple things going on. One is we can, under the current rules, our deputy director can waive those federal environmental crosscutters, and she's done that as a general matter for small DAC water projects, and is allowing that through June 30, 2021. So it's basically any planning that's starting now, or that sort of thing. Construction projects don't need to have address those federal environmental crosscutters. It's not like a policy that's necessarily established for the long term, but at least we think it will help for. Probably going to apply to like 100 or so projects currently. So there's that. And then there was some new state legislation that provides for a CEQA exemption, essentially a statutory exemption under certain circumstances for small, for DAC projects. But there are a number of criteria, like like you can't have a storage tank bigger than so much, your well can't produce more than so much, and that sort of thing. So there is like a potential opportunity to even be exempted from CEQA.
I think all those things help, Joe. I think anything that helps streamline the project and get us to the finish line helps. The other thing that I think we've done that I'm really happy for is I had CVWD join the what's it called, the Community Water Alliance. It's like the mutual companies, it's a Don Ortega's group.
Cal Mutual?
Yeah, but they have a new one, the Community Water Systems Alliance, I think, where they just focus entirely on things that impact disadvantaged communities, and so they get into the nitty-gritty of language for legislation and really try to identify areas of opportunities. I know they've been following the SB 200 policy very closely. And so, being involved in that has also really helped us understand where we might have an opportunity for input.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. So we have about 5 minutes left. So I want to give some space to Emily, if you'd like to sort of recap some of the main points that have jumped out at you, and then we can.
Yeah, I was just going to commend Costello's work and the Coachella Valley Water Association. I didn't get the last word there, but water district, and just basically talk about, say there are 3 projects that you guys have worked on, and then I was just going to walk through sort of general themes and findings. Basically, in terms of barriers, there are issues around, I think the biggest one would be that the application process was 3 years and construction was 4 months. And so there might be ways to improve that process. And there were barriers around Department of Public Health, local environmental compliance issues, and maybe if there's compliance orders there, that would help with some of that. It's expensive to connect systems, so how do we manage some of that? There's specific limitations around funding and the buckets of funding, so you need to know how to navigate that process. And then you walk through very specific tips for applicants in terms of, don't risk the minimal environmental work, communicate with stakeholders, communicate with the state, so everybody's on the same page. That helps. I think you alluded that it was a trust building exercise, so folks are sort of all in it for the duration. And in terms of things that went well, you also discussed just communications mostly more than anything. And there was some conversation around potential environmental waivers for small disadvantaged communities and that sort of thing. So anyway, and then I was also going to mention too, this work that you've done on a master plan, but also highlighting the expense, right? I think you said it was $80 million to consolidate about 83 projects or so, but you should hopefully realize some efficiencies and things like that by having an overall master plan. Are there any other takeaways you'd like to talk about?
Emily, looks like you kind of cut out there first.
Did I cut out? I'm sorry. I went through my whole list. I don't know what you got or didn't get.
I think we got everything. I think you just cut out at the end when you said, is there anything I'm missing?
Okay, yeah. Anything else that I might be missing?
Let's see. That sounded like a pretty
so.
robust summary to me. Yeah.
That looks good. I think it's good to have a clear sense of what the potential projects are, and I think that would help any region across the state to have a real sense of the projects, and then they could just go and pick projects. It just streamlines the whole thing.
Right.
Great. And it looks like I think we are on the countdown now. We have about 45 seconds or so. So I'll just take this time to thank you all so much for sharing, Castulo, for asking questions, everyone, for bringing really insightful, clarifying questions to this. And thank you, Emily, for being our reporter. If you all want to go ahead and head back to the big breakout room, you can, and get like 30 seconds to yeah, to get settled. I'll see you all there.
All right, so we should all be back. So just as a reminder, you will need to reset your selections. If you would like to listen to the audio in Spanish, please toggle down to the bottom of your screen and select the Spanish audio channel. And then please remember to reselect the view that you'd like by going to the top of your screen. I'm doing the drop down button and then selecting which view you'd like. So now that we're back, we do ask that each group have a reporter that can take about 3 minutes or less to provide the following information from the breakout session. So we'd like the group's top takeaways, areas of consensus, conflict, any feedback, or any questions that came up. So do we have a volunteer? Does anyone want to go first? If so, please raise your hand in the participant list. Otherwise, I will just start calling on the various groups. So let's start in order as I don't see a hand up. Let's go with group 1. Who's the reporter?
I think group 1 was dissolved and put into different rooms.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just, so how can we do this? Let's see. Dawn, would you like to share what you learned from your group?
Yeah, I think some notes were taken and I didn't. We had, I was in group 2, and that included Katie and Horatio and Andrew and Michael, Michael Ben. I think you were taking notes, so you might want to chime in. But we had more of a roundtable discussion on our experiences with the SAFER program. I think we were pretty much in agreement about the things that went really well, and what we've learned from it, and where the program is going. And then Katie had a presentation on some work that she's done in a report that was published by the Water Research Foundation that looked at solutions for underperforming water systems. And I think the work was, really interesting and aligns very well with what the SAFER program is doing. So maybe I'll let Katie or others in my group chime in on that.
Sure, yeah, no problem. Go ahead.
Yeah, our group discussed a lot about what we were doing before the pandemic, and that we were doing more interactions within the advisory group. But even though we're in a pandemic, we are moving forward. We're not stuck on because of the pandemic. We're still moving forward. And also the presentation that Katie presented is very informative about what are we doing here, about disadvantaged communities and small systems and the troubles that are happening. I think that information is very important. Maybe she can share it with the rest of the group. Thank you.
And I do know that hopefully the breakout session was recorded. So that way we can all revisit each and every story that was told. So thank you, Horacio and Dawn, for your comments. I'd like to ask David Corey, I see you're the reporter for the group for which Castulo Estrada presented. Can you please report out?
Actually, I volunteered to take over for David because we weren't sure if he was connected or not. So this is Emily Rooney with Ag Council, and I was the reporter. Castulo Estrada, who's the board vice president for Coachella Valley Water District, walked through 3 projects that utilize SAFER funding to get completed in the area. And there was a school, a mobile home park, and another water system, it looks like, for some residential properties. And I'll just sort of talk about the general themes that they found in their experience. There were some challenges and barriers. On the challenging side, they approximated it took about 3 years to get through the application process, but construction takes about 4 months. And so there was some discussion around how to streamline the process to get these projects up and running faster. Some other challenges that they had were around the Department of Public Health and the local environmental agency, and his suggestion was that some compliance orders could help fix some of that. The cost to connect systems can be expensive, and so there's a constant conversation about how to manage those costs. There's also very specific limitations in different funding buckets, so you kind of have to know how to navigate the process in the application side. And then he was just talking about the need to streamline the process in terms of the application and the regulatory process. Costello was great in providing tips for applicants. He said, don't be afraid to ask questions to water board staff or any community folks. Also, don't risk a minimal environmental report, and always communicate with the stakeholders and the state water board staff in an effort to bring everybody along in the process. Joe did chime in that there is a possibility to waive some federal environmental cross-cutters for some small disadvantaged communities in very specific areas. So that could be helpful. In terms of what went well, always just improved communications with state and locals was a good process, and at times could be difficult, but also very rewarding. And the one thing I really liked hearing about was about Coachella Valley's master plan as it relates to water systems. And they worked with the county folks to create this entire master plan, but they're estimating that they're going to need about $80 million to consolidate 83 projects. So a lot of work ahead of them, but at least they've been able to map it all out. So I think that's it. And I apologize because my 6-year-old son is in his reading class right behind me. So if you're hearing that, they're doing very well, but they're also very loud. So thank you.
Oh, I live that life, so I'll totally get it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Emily. I would like to hear from, give me one second, for anyone that was in Sergio's group. Who is the reporter that was designated in Sergio's group?
Ok. ¿Sería yo, Isabel?
Hola, buenos días. Gracias.
Hola, ¿es en el grupo de Sergio Carranza?
Sí.
Ok, bueno, era en mi grupo. En ese grupo estaba Adriana, Sergio, Lucy y una servidora. Bueno, nosotros estuvimos escuchando parte de lo que los proyectos en los cuales Sergio se ha desenvuelto debido al SB200. Él trabaja con trabajadores agrícolas, la mayoría son en Coachella, los niveles de pobreza 35%, los ingresos serían de 27,306, tienen falta de infraestructura, de agua potable, tienen problemas con el arsénico y también, ¿perdón?
Perdón, tenemos el intérprete que tiene que tener
perdón.
traducir. Sí, perdón, un momento. Voy a...
Yes.
Disculpen.
Okay, perdón. Un momento.
Está muy bien.
I just want to provide everybody an update. If you would like to hear the interpretation from Spanish to English, everyone that is currently in the English channel or the off channel, please go down to the bottom of your screen and select Spanish. So that way we can hear Aldo, the interpreter, interpret for Isabel. All right. I'm going to be doing the same. Thank you. Okay, Aldo, do you need Isabel to repeat anything, or do you have it a pretty good handle?
Aldo, because some people had not clicked the English, do you mind just repeating? Because it sounds like some folks are now on the English channel. So just to catch everybody up, if you could please repeat that, please. If that would be helpful for you.
Ok, Isabel, el intérprete nos pregunta si puedes empezar de nuevo, por favor, para que él pueda traducir.
Sí, perdón, se me olvidó que tenía que interpretar,
Sí,
disculpe.
no hay problema, gracias.
Sí, perdón. Sí, bueno, en el grupo de nosotros estaba Sergio Carranza, Adriana Rentería, Lucy Hernández y una servidora, Isabel. Sergio nos estaba informando de su área donde él trabaja para el área de Coachella. También nos informa que él trabaja con gente, la mayoría es agrícola, gente de extrema pobreza, con ingresos demasiado bajos. Tienen problemas en infraestructura y agua potable. Nos explica de los proyectos que ellos han formado. Son proyectos en desarrollo para poder ayudar a estas personas. Por ejemplo, tienen problemas de arsénico. Él ha trabajado en estos proyectos por más de 20 años. Ha logrado varios proyectos en lo que es en la avenida 76 sobre agua potable. Ha buscado otras soluciones para poder llevar filtración a estas personas a su casa como filtros individuales. También ha logrado tener un sistema de filtración en el cual la persona puede ir a llenar sus galones de agua, pero esto es nada más agua para cocinar y para tomar. También tienen muchas barreras en los reembolsos y es donde tardan mucho para ellos lograr esos proyectos. Y yo también hice el comentario que es necesario que ese dinero se enfoque cuando se distribuya equitativamente y vaya directamente a donde debe de ir para que estas comunidades rurales vayamos saliendo, aparte de esta pandemia, vayamos sobreviviendo. También hablamos cómo poder involucrar a la comunidad y empoderarla y cómo se debe trabajar con la colaboración con los gobiernos locales y estatales. También trabaja con diferentes, Sergio trabaja con diferentes comunidades como Pueblo Unido, construyendo el sistema para poder a la filtración.
Building different systems for cleaner water and filtering water. People also that are using these systems that they're individually installed, they give them a follow-up monitoring, they replace the filter as well, and they also need those funds so these programs can actually continue functioning and working alongside it, and having these people receiving these type of services. And we continue working alongside with them so we can improve these communities. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much for sharing. All right, so I believe we have one more reporter. Michael Claiborne volunteered to be the reporter for our group with Jesse. Michael, if you're ready.
Sure. So Jesse, correct me if I missed anything or stated anything wrong, but Jesse talked about her experience and self-help's experience in Cameron Creek, which is a community.
Sí, lo estoy oyendo. Sí, gracias.
Oh, I apologize. I believe that Isabel is confirming that she can hear Aldo on the other line. So continue,
Good.
Michael.
So Cameron Creek is a community near Farmersville in Tulare County. In 2014, at the beginning of the drought, they had about a dozen wells go dry at the beginning, is my understanding. And so that, began a drinking water emergency that looks like triggered some really fast action. In terms of interim solutions, two things we talked about. One is that this was the first community to get a pilot program started with the water tanks that now are in many communities and were installed during the drought. That's a program where a large water tank is installed on the property outside the home and connected to the home's actual drinking water pipes within the home, so that folks can at least have some form of running water in their home while permanent solutions are being developed. And the second thing is the more common thing that I think we're all kind of familiar with, which is bottled water delivery, was arranged for. I think that was also kind of fall of 2014, if I got that right, Jesse. And then long-term solutions.
Yes.
Perfect. Long-term solution was extension of water service from Farmersville. That project went extremely quickly in terms of how fast these projects usually go. It was completed what? Summer 2015, Jesse? So about a year?
It was less than that. It was actually completed in early 2015, January or February. And everything was totally wrapped up by the summer.
Yeah, which is surprisingly fast. So I think there's a lot of things we can learn from this this case study that Jesse shared. Some of the lessons learned we talked about were the importance of forming relationships and building trust early, both with the residents and with of the impacted community and with the jurisdiction, the water system nearby that would be extending service. Both are going to be critical to moving a project like this forward. And in this case, there was cooperation from Farmersville and some pre-existing relationships that helped build that trust and reach consensus quickly. And the other thing we talked about are cooperation and collaboration between agencies to get funding approved quickly. That also happened in this case. And because of those kind of two or three things, this project was able to move really, really fast. Anything I missed there, Jesse, that was important that we talked through? Seems like a really important case study.
No, I think that was a great summary. Thank you.
This is Jason.
All right, great. Thank you for everyone for sharing. I think that it was really valuable for all of us to hear the various stories that, you know, the community experts have been a part of. And all right, give me one moment. Let's see. Now, were there any other lessons learned that the storytellers would like to present or inform all of us on this Zoom call? So that way we can go ahead and have an additional takeaway.
If I may.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Sergio here with Pueblo Unido. One of the things that I want to share that overall, definitely the projects are moving along. It's pretty remarkable despite the pandemic. But one of the things that worries me, and I'm very concerned, I want to share with the group, is the fact that many projects that we are about to consolidate either can be, in this case, drinking water and also sanitation. We got the pipelines finally in some projects that we are helping the communities to consolidate. Locally, those projects, one of them I was involved, which is sanitation project. The other ones, it was a project that was led by the Torres Martinez Reservation. So that's drinking water. The pipeline is right there in front of the property of the families. Mm-hmm. So when we actually try to connect families to that and apply for funding, the response that we have is, well, they are private, connections, so it's their responsibility to connect. So think about all these projects that we are funding, bringing millions of dollars to put the pipeline on the ground, right in front of the families, just to learn that the families can now get access for grants. And I'm talking about farm workers' families that definitely lives there. So that's one of the barriers that today still exist, and we have not been able to actually to resolve. So and project managers have their hand tied because they follow legislation, regulations of programs, and the only response is, I'm sorry, but there is no funding opportunity for those families. And once again, you know, all the incredible process and community engagement, it becomes you know, defeated for the fact that that the last portion of these projects to achieve these you know, victories is definitely truncated by the fact that they don't have access to these grants. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Is there anyone else on the Zoom that would like to share? All right. So just give me one more moment. Okay, so again, I want to thank you all for taking the time not only to share your stories, but also the individuals that spoke to provide us a little bit of an overview and an insight into what was going on into your individual group. As I mentioned earlier, we have attempted to record each of the breakout sessions just to make sure that we can revisit them, since we were all split up and we would like to hear all of your stories. So we'll make sure to do that. We will also collect all of the final notes. We were taking notes as you were speaking, and we plan on compiling those final notes and then routing them to the advisory group members. So we are a little bit ahead of time, but that's fine. So before we move into our public comment section, we do want to take a little break. So feel free to stretch, go grab a snack. We'll be back in about 10 minutes. And then we will move into public comment. So I see it's 11:23. Let's come back at, I'd say 11:35. All right. Thank you.
All right, everyone, welcome back. This is Haiti with the Office of Public Participation. During the group reporting section, we heard a lot of examples of challenges with timelines and funding. We want to continue diving into your feedback on how we can continue to improve our safer funding process. Also, Sergio, please know that someone from the Water Board's SAFER team will follow up with you directly regarding the comment you shared before the break. Now, I'd like to reintroduce Jasmine with the Division of Financial Assistance to discuss the streamlining project funding process. Jasmine?
Hi again, everyone. I'll be providing an overview of our funding process today, focused primarily on capital projects. And I'll touch on some improvements we've implemented, as well as a few ideas we have for additional improvements. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So you can follow along with your funding process handout, which should have been provided to you with your meeting materials. So for capital projects, planning or construction, we have 5 project phases. The first is for the potential recipient to prepare an application. This is where the potential recipient prepares and submits a complete application through the Financial Assistance Application Submittal Tool, or FAST. This step can take a few months to many months, depending on several factors such as the availability and completeness of key documents. And in cases of consolidation, preparation of these documents can take longer, sometimes as more than one entity is involved. The second phase is the DFA review of an application. In this phase, DFA, or Division of Financial Assistance staff, review the application's various packages, and those include general, environmental, technical, financial, and legal packages, and they prepare the master file. A master file is a compilation of application documents, reviews, and clearances for a project. This step can also take a few months to many months, again, based on several factors. Each project is unique, but some reasons review might take longer is if a project is controversial, on federal land, or if the applicant is undergoing litigation. The third phase is the preparation of the financing agreement. This phase includes scope negotiation between DFA and the potential recipient, financing agreement preparation, and agreement routing for approvals and execution. This step typically takes several months, up to a year, could maybe even be longer than that, again, depending on the nature and complexity of a project. I wanted to briefly mention that Jesse Snyder's case study earlier on the Cameron Creek City of Farmersville project, that financing agreement, it sounded like it took only 2 months, and it was an emergency drought situation, and I was asking around during the break, and it sounded like during that time, some of the CEQA reviews were also waived for those emergency situations. So, moving on to the fourth phase, this is the post-execution project management. Once the financing agreement is executed, the project work begins. This phase includes ongoing project management by DFA staff, amendments, and disbursements. So depending on the project, this phase can last from months to years. Lastly is project closeout. This step includes the final invoice, final project inspection, and project closeout, and can take weeks to months. Next slide, please. For the prepare application phase, Some of the improvements that we've implemented include the pre-application, which allows DFA staff to more quickly evaluate the proposed project and get the potential recipient connected with the right funding program. We've identified projects where we can implement CEQA-only review, which eliminates the need to conduct certain studies and get concurrence from federal agencies on certain environmental aspects of a project. We've implemented project-specific credit review waivers for certain 100% grant projects, and we are using technical assistance, or TA, more often to conduct full planning for projects, which eliminates the need for a small DAC system to go through a separate process to apply for planning grants. Next, please. For the prepare application phase, further ideas for improvement that we've come up with include evaluating the effectiveness of the pre-application that I mentioned earlier, increasing coordination amongst DFA staff for the various types of solutions being implemented. For example, many systems have a planning project, are receiving some form of TA, and may also be receiving bottled water as an interim solution until their long-term solution is in place. We'd like to look at a general waiver of credit review for 100% planning grants, and we'd also like to identify recurring issues with applications and make updates to the application and instructions. Next, please. For the review application phase, improvements implemented include updated package checklists, which helps ensure all relevant information and documentation is being requested upfront. We've implemented a digital master file for ease of routing and review as we work remotely. There is a revised median household income, or MHI, determination methodology, which will reduce the number of income surveys that need to be conducted to determine a system's eligibility for funding. The Drinking Water State Revolving Funds Intended Use Plan this fiscal year was revised to ease funding restrictions on planning projects and larger dollar amount projects. And we're conducting more regular check-in meetings between DFA, the Division of Drinking Water, and water systems to keep projects moving along. Next, please. For the review application phase, further ideas for improvement include engaging with TA providers to identify ways we can improve the application process as a whole, and make further updates to internal review of documents and checklists. Next. For the prepare financing agreement phase, improvements implemented include evaluating projects we have in queue and determining appropriate funding sources. During this time, we have had to implement an electronic routing process for our reviews. We are getting management review earlier on in the process when we develop scopes and budgets to minimize getting too far down a path and to avoid rework. For some complicated projects, we are implementing phased approaches. For example, construction of all elements related to addressing an emergency need would be in phase 1, and then following up with the remaining items in phase 2. And where possible, we are combining multiple projects for the same entity into a single agreement to minimize processing and paperwork related to having multiple funding agreements. Sorry, please go back one slide. Or, yeah, back please. Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Jasmine. It seems like we're having technical difficulties and it is not allowing us to go back.
Oh, okay. you can keep following along in your handout. So for the prepare financing agreement phase, further ideas for improvement include training new staff on scope writing, and we have this training planned for early 2021, and developing more standardized scope language and budget categories that can be applied broadly. Okay, so it looks like we're caught up now with the slide. So for the post-execution project management phase, improvements implemented include the using letter amendments when appropriate and bypassing the full amendment process. These may be used for time extension or final budget approvals, FBAs, that don't include a cost increase. Using electronic invoice submittals for recipients through FAST, in addition to mailing hard copies, and using a uniform cover page to organize invoices and supporting documentation for ease of review. Next, please. For the post-execution project management phase, further ideas for improvement include increasing our check-ins with TA and interim solution providers, waiving the requirement to update credit review for 100% grant-funded projects that have a cost increase but no change in scope, evaluating the final budget approval or FBA process and procedures, and evaluating different methods for reimbursement of allowances for construction projects. Next, please. For the project closeout phase, improvements we've implemented include use of a final inspection checklist and new procedures on how to conduct virtual inspections during this telework time. I wanted to note that your handout also goes over improvements implemented and ideas for some of our other types of projects, such as interim solutions, technical assistance, administrators, and emergency repairs. So at this time, I'll ask OPP if we have any time to take questions or comments on the funding process before we go into public comment.
Thanks, Jasmine. We do have a couple minutes, so we can do that at this time. For those of you who would like to ask any questions regarding the funding process, feel free to raise your hand. And if you're joining in by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand.
So
I have a question. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Castulo, I do see your hand up, so we'll try and get through the individuals that would like to speak in order. Thank you.
Am I going first?
I believe somebody was speaking.
I think it was.
All right. Don White. Okay, Don, go ahead and provide your comment.
Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand electronically right away, so I did my physical hand. But yeah, these I do have some thoughts on this, and it's really more questions. A lot of these ideas for streamlining, I think they're all really good. I know there's been a lot of effort made to streamline the process, and you know, my experience is really anecdotal, so I don't know for sure, but it seems like it still takes so long, and I don't know, you know, how, you know, what's the reason for that. I mean, even the earlier presentation on the Coachella Valley, you know, 3 years for the application and only 4 months to construct it. It seems interesting that the administrative portion takes longer than the physical portion. And I'm wondering if there are any metrics in place or goals that are looking to be met, like once an application is complete, you know, what % of the funding agreements within a certain period of time, or if those kinds of metrics are being discussed and put into place. And then the other part of that is, you know, is there some flexibility? And when you talk to staff at DFA, it seems like there's a very rigid process where they can't look at the application until all of it's complete. And if there were some flexibility to perhaps start reviewing the environmental documents while the technical package is still being worked on, I think that would speed it up a lot. So not to cut corners or not do any particular steps, but the flexibility to be able to work with systems in that process to try to get things happening concurrently. So those are my questions and thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Dawn. For your part about the metrics, we are starting, I know that folks have been looking at our funding process for a long time, and they've implemented a lot of things, as you mentioned and I mentioned. I think we have recently established a more specific funding process work group to kind of look more closely at what our hangups are. And I think part of that work group will be to look at some of those metrics that you mentioned and kind of assess even more what our challenges are internally. And then for the flexibility in reviewing, I do believe that it is possible to start some portions of the review without the complete application in place. Maybe Joe can chime in if that's incorrect, but from my understanding, that is possible and is being done in some cases.
Yeah, thanks, Jasmine.
Thank you.
John, yeah, thanks for your questions. So yeah, a couple things to keep in mind with what Jasmine was presenting. A lot of those improvements she identified are, I'd say, within the last maybe 9 months or so. So when we're talking about previous projects or some of the case studies, we certainly learned from those, but those improvements weren't in place at that time. In terms of like reviewing packages, yeah, Jasmine's correct. Like our project managers can start doing that. In some cases, we hesitate with certain systems to start diving into reviewing partially complete applications, because one of our experiences is that in certain circumstances, an entity won't complete their application. So if we start, it can be basically lost time. So like Jasmine was suggesting, certainly if we know we have a motivated applicant and they have the capacity and ability, either because they have a TA working with them or they've shown that they'll follow through, then certainly we can do that and do that kind of look at doing that streamlining. So yeah, that's a good suggestion. We're trying to implement it, but can't necessarily do it universally.
Thank you.
Sure.
Great. Thank you, Dawn, for your questions. We have Castillo. Castillo, go ahead.
Yes, hi. I'm going to try to do my best here to really be clear on my question, because I haven't fully formed my thoughts. But I think I'll start off by saying that I really like the idea of master agreements. I like the idea of using technical assistance for planning projects. And I like the idea of the pre-application. And I guess I just wanted to get more clarification, or perhaps just kind of brainstorm here or make a comment and ask this question. If there's a way to perhaps provide some advanced funding as part of the pre-application process. Let's say that the pre-application process says, okay, it kind of gives you the general perhaps the general want. So let's say that you are an agency, you are a group that is looking to apply for multiple projects. I think even in the list of projects that we went over today, there were a few from, I think, Lake County or the same agency. But let's say that you're ready to put in 3-4 projects, and maybe perhaps part of that application process, the pre-application says, okay, well, It gives you a sense of perhaps the budget ask that you're going to request through the completion of the packages. But if you're going to do a big chunk of them, would it be possible to provide some advanced funding at least to cover the at least portion or perhaps all the planning effort so that it doesn't need to get rolled in as part of the construction funding that I think would come out of finalizing the construction of the big project. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out, is there a way where it's beneficial also for the state staff and the state to get a sense that there is an attempt for a master agreement that is made up of various projects, and you get a sense of that because you kind of look at it through the pre-application kind of lens.
Yeah, this is Joe. So I think yeah, there are those opportunities. You know, we're certainly looking for those. I mean, there are a few examples of, you know, a couple of larger entities like yourself where there's interest in doing multiple projects. So yeah, we're definitely open to doing that. And when you say provide some initial funding, the way I'm interpreting that, and you tell me if I'm wrong, is like we may know initially what, say, the planning costs might be, but some of the, you know, construction costs or even all the planning costs may not be totally defined, but have kind of almost like a rolling schedule and a rolling budget. Like, you know, initially that, hey, we need at least $1 million for some of the like preliminary engineering reports and that sort of thing. We're not totally sure what plans and specs might be because we don't know what the project will end up being, right? Or the projects. So can we at least get something in place and then use that as that agreement as the framework for moving forward, so we don't have to go through like multiple separate funding agreements. And yeah, I think Jasmine might have mentioned that before, but we are looking at that kind of idea of phasing. So I do think there are those opportunities to do that. And we're doing that in a couple of cases with some larger projects where you know, we have some greater certainty on what some of the initial like construction costs are going to be. You know, there's less certainty in terms of exactly what the overall project will be and what the overall cost will be, but we're trying to not wait until everything is super specified and defined to start moving forward. And as you're aware, Castulo, because you guys deal with CEQA a lot, the challenge is like, how can we do that and make sure we're meeting our requirements under CEQA as a responsible agency, right? Like when we approve something under CEQA and we take that discretionary action, we have to at least have a decent idea of what is it that we're approving, right? What is the project? But I think especially on the planning end, we have a lot of flexibility. And it's going to be a matter of like working with you and some of those other larger entities and figure out what makes the most sense.
Thank you, Joe. So would you say, Joe, that there is a way within the pre-application process where you can give a sense that the projects that you're putting in are not meant to be individual projects, but that your aim is for them to be part of a master agreement?
Yeah, and I think we're starting to do that with you guys. You know, in terms of like with some of your projects in the case study that you gave, and you know, part of that is kind of working through those details and what's going to make the most sense. Like you had talked about, what makes the most sense in terms of bundling, right? Those systems together, because I know you've got fairly you know, your projects are pretty darn ambitious in terms of you know, the number of systems that you're trying to include, and you know, the size of those capital projects too, right? The miles and of the transmission lines and the size of those pipes and that sort of thing. So I think there are those, opportunities to figure out how can we best bundle it together where it makes sense, right? From a cost standpoint, and also just from a managing the project standpoint. What's going to be most efficient for not just us, but for you too.
Thank you, Joe. I think that really, I think you answered my question, and I think it goes back to my comment about as long as we have some communication back and forth, we can figure out what the best approach is. So I
Great.
think that's kind of what you're saying. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
Great. Thank you, Casolo, and thank you, Joe, for responding. I'd like to verify. Isabel Solorio, ¿usted tiene una pregunta?
¿Aló?
Sí, bueno. Isabel, hola. Yes, hello. I am asking if you have a question. I'm not sure if you were raising your hand. I do have a question, but that's regarding how fast can the funds be available, because there's people close to me who has problems with their private wells. And
Un momento, porque tengo que avisar a los demás. Sí. So again, if you would like to hear the interpretation of Isabel's comment, please go down to the bottom of your screen, locate the interpretation icon, and select English. That is where Aldo, our interpreter, will be translating. Okay, puedes seguir. Gracias, Isabel.
Perdón. Sí, ¿qué tan rápido pues se
how
puede?
fast can we have access so these people who have difficulties with their private wells and individual wells, that way they can get financial help, that way they don't have to be struggling? That's my question. How can we make that process faster so we can help them? Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and give that a shot. I mean, well, one of the things that we've done is, rather than kind of set up our own state water board program to deal with individual households, is we're working through our technical assistance providers like Self-Help, who has a household well program. So we have the one funding agreement with Self-Help, and then Self-Help sets up a program to work with individual homeowners. So I forget if Jesse or somebody was on, but could speak to that and kind of what that status is.
I am on, but apologies, Joe. I'm not equipped with a status update on that at the moment.
Okay, no worries. Sorry to put you on the spot, Jesse.
That's okay.
Not your department.
No, it isn't.
All right, thank you, Joe. We have Camille. Camille, go ahead.
Sure. So I don't know if this is a question or just more of a comment, but some of the things that I saw, at least when I was a technical assistance provider, that didn't sound like they were necessarily being addressed were a couple of issues related to how the funding applications are processed. So for example, I was working with a small water system that has an annual budget of less than $5,000. And then when their application for funding was going through, they were asked to do an audit, which would have cost $25,000, which seems just kind of silly. And so I think there are some internal things that could be done to determine creditworthiness without applying the same kind of cut and dry approaches that would be applied to large agencies or to cities, that could help streamline things. The other thing that was really frustrating, well, there's two. One was that funding takes so long that by the time you start to get to the point where you can implement the contract, you often have to redo the reports you already did, which is really, really frustrating and costly. And I think the last issue was related to the processing of invoices. So it was very difficult to get contractors to come back to do a project again when there were delays of over 6 months in paying their invoices. And I know that this has been a consistent problem for folks, but I think that using the statutory language that allows advance payment could be very helpful. Otherwise, we just burn a lot of bridges with providers that are willing to do the work and do it really effectively. And if there's anything that we can do as an advisory committee to help, brainstorm with staff about how to meet all the regulatory criteria that you have to deal with and the statutory criteria while still getting funding out the door, I think that, we'd be happy to do it. I'd be happy to work on it. But yeah, it's just the extreme slowdown in getting money out the door is really killing a lot of projects. I mean, construction projects cannot wait for 1 to 2 years for funding approval. They're often really affected seasonally as well. And so every time we miss these kind of benchmarks or we don't budget for the amount of time we need in advance before the project goes forward, it makes it really hard for the TA providers who end up having to burn their personal relationships trying to assure service providers that the money's coming, it's going to be in the mail, and half the time the TA providers haven't been paid either. So so I just wanted to throw that out there. I think it'd be really great if this program could think about how it could internally streamline or relax some of these things to right size the regulatory criteria for the size and sophistication of the system and the project.
Yeah, thanks for your comment, Camille. I wasn't sure if you wanted a response. I can provide one. But
totally your call, Joe. I'm happy to,
okay.
to waive a response so more people can comment, but
I guess that's something we can go back and look at in terms of your comment on requiring audits and that sort of thing. Of course, it really depends on what kind of project it is, whether we need an audited financials, I assume, is what you're talking about. It's one of those kind of challenging things in terms of balancing our responsibilities, right? Is like if a water system can't provide audited financials and they're applying for money, then there's a question of whether they have adequate fiscal controls, right? So can we be confident that the state funds will be spent to the purpose which they're provided? But
sure,
that's
a lot of these systems, sorry to interrupt, a lot of these systems are on the list because they don't have TMF. So the other thing,
I know. Yeah.
And part of the difficulty is also, so with the client I was talking about is forced to take on the grant because the county won't do it, but they're consolidating. Right. So the other thing is, even if you audit their financials, they're going to dissolve. So I think there's kind of just, some things to consider about the unique circumstances of each project.
Yep, definitely. Yep, I agree. Yeah. And then I think, Jasmine mentioned a number of the things we're trying to do we are looking at streamlining and are certainly open to any suggestions on what else we can do, because I understand the frustration of, preparing material for an application and then it becomes stale and you have to redo it just because the process is taking such a long time. Now, in terms of the invoices and advance payment, although there's that statutory authority in SB 200, it becomes we're having enough challenges at the moment just processing regular invoices with, the new accounting system that we have, and it's just taking longer than it used to take to process an invoice. So you can think about it, if you throw in things like advance payment, then you're really keeping two sets of books, right? So you're keeping the books, and we're not set up to do that right now, of how much money you already gave out and whether that money was actually spent for a reimbursable cost. So we haven't set that up yet because there are a lot of other things that we're being challenged with internally just to get things running smoothly with the new accounting system. But one of the things we did do, and which will help with some systems, is we talked about this issue with the TA providers and the technical assistance agreement we're going to have with self-help under with the safe and affordable drinking water funds we got last fiscal year, includes having a bridge loan program. So that's it's not an ideal fix, but we think it should help.
Thank you, Joe. And Camille, thank you for your comments. So we have Sergio. Sergio, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. So there is definitely a common denominator here in this section. It is definitely how can we eliminate barriers to streamline and expedite the process of project implementation. One of the things that I want to just to ask is the passing of SB 974, which provide the waiving of CEQA reports on disadvantaged communities. It definitely gives us a huge advantage of expediting the process of completing the different packages, specifically the environmental one. The question I have for you is this: can we do something about having some kind of memo given to the project managers that we're working with, so that we can actually waive that completion of that report, and we do just a categorical exemption based on SB 974? Because we have been trying to convey this message to the project managers, but they believe that they haven't heard anything from upper management about this. This will have an incredible positive ramifications for all the projects. We have 2 drinking water projects that are community-driven projects, and they are the largest in the Eastern Coachella Valley. We have this result, my goodness, we'll be so much ahead of the game, and just preparing a categorical exemption for the CEQA. So do you have any feedback from that? So is this possible to do that?
Yeah, thanks, Sergio. Yeah, so we are working on internally on checklists for the applicability of SB 974. And for everybody else who doesn't know, that bill was passed this year. So it goes into effect January 1st officially. So we are looking at that, but then keep in mind, it's not a broad waiver just because it's a small DAC water system project. There are a number of criteria and qualifications that apply in terms of what that project includes. So we have to be really careful about how that's applied. That's why we are working internally on a checklist, and then we'll make sure that we are communicating that, especially like with our TA providers such as yourself, so everybody understands the context, and there are limitations associated with that, but certainly where we can, we'll want to take advantage of that new exemption.
This is Jessie. Could I just quickly comment as a follow-up? That the bill also included some requirements for labor, which were imposed. And I'm, still really unclear as to the implications, especially cost implications of that. Are staff also evaluating that part of it, Joe? And will there be some recommendations around that?
Yeah, we're not, because again, we're assuming that in general, that exemption is going to be applied by someone other than us. We're not going to be the lead agency, right? So whoever the lead agency is, that's the other thing they'll have to realize, is that there is that those labor requirements that we will need to include in any funding agreement that uses that exemption. Now, I've been told by at least one entity, they're saying, oh, that's not a big deal. It's something they have to, you know, comply with anyway. I'm not totally sure if that's true. And I'm not sure if we'll be able to advise, you know, another government entity on what those costs might be or the implications for them. They'd have to look at it themselves, right, to see if those labor requirements are something that they already have baked into, you know, when they go out and contract with folks, or whether that would be a new additional cost. But it's a good point, Jesse.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Joe and Jesse and Sergio. So we have a few more raised hands, and so we will now go to Elena. Elena, if you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I had a question, and I've been thinking about for a little bit, and I think this is the appropriate time. You know, I'm from Pixley. It's a small community with a small water system. Also surrounded are Tipton, Teviston, Early Mark. They're all small water systems. And we talk a lot about there not being enough funding. And I was wondering, we talk about consolidation. And I was wondering, what if we, if those small water systems could get together and use their funding for the treatment, you know, successful treatment for our water, instead of trying to work separately. I think that would be more effective. And how could you help us to get to that point?
Joe, you want me to kick that off and then you can pick that? I mean, consolidation is something that we are definitely trying to do. And I think that you are speaking exactly to what one of our programmatic goals is across the state. You know, there are a lot of different ways that those type of consolidations can be done. And it depends certainly on terms of how physically far apart they are, but you know, there are different ways to do water partnerships, some being consolidation, some being you know, joint powers authorities for areas where maybe people don't want to give up their governance yet, but they want to work together to build, you know, a larger treatment plant and look at things together. So, you know, we're very happy and you know, are doing outreach, and I'll make sure that you get and your communities get involved in some of those outreach efforts that we're doing, because that's exactly the kind of thinking that is important, because our water systems are so fragmented that the costs across the communities, you know, across the small community is hard to sustain. Whereas if you spread it across a larger community, that it's much easier. Joe, I don't know if you wanted to add on to that, but. I want to make sure, did I answer your question, Elena?
Yes, but I also have a question as far as I think that our community would also benefit to be able to have somebody from the state come and meet with us, because we have trouble getting any communication with our water system. Our board, they meet in a little room. I have asked them if they could, well, now we can't, right, because of the pandemic, but before we used to be able to meet in the Memorial Building, and we did have one meeting there when we were trying to come into an agreement as on an aspect of the water. And a lot of people showed up, but, you know, we're not having that open communication with them that we would like to have.
Why don't I contact you after this
meeting,
and we can talk more specifically about sort of how to do engagement.
Okay, I don't know if they're going to look at, their past funding they've received, these communities here, because they're all right next to each other. Okay, it's Early Mart. Teviston's a couple of miles from there, and then we're 5 miles from Early Mart. Tipton's another 5 mile from us north. So we're all connected in that, in a good small area. So that's why I thought, it might be more effective and better use of funding. But that's a question for the experts. That's why I thought I would ask you today.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm be happy to follow up with you afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Elena.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thank you, Michelle. If we could please move, we have two more commenters. Michael Claiborne, I see that you are next.
Great, thanks. So really glad we're talking about this topic today. I think it's really critical that we, insofar as it's possible, make these processes and funding move more quickly. It's really important to communities that have drinking water issues and maximum contaminant level violations. It's also really important, I think, broadly for the success of this program. So I think this is a really important conversation. Thank you for the presentation. I thought it was really informative. And I also was glad to see how much thinking is going into internally streamlining these processes. I do think it's also a two-way street. I think there should be expectations for the TA providers to make sure that we're moving projects forward as quickly as possible as well, and for water systems. But really appreciate all the thinking that's gone into this, and also the willingness of staff to listen to recommendations for the TA providers. I think we've had a lot of conversations in the last several weeks in particular that have been productive around how to streamline some of these processes. I would echo Camille's points about audits. I think that's something that's important to look at a little closer. I'm thinking about, and Isabel would know this even better than me, how the requirement for audited financials for planning projects can sometimes slow things down significantly. In Lanier, they had, when they applied for funding, and this is on the sewer side, but for a feasibility study for sewer, septic to sewer project. They'd had no audited financials at Lanier CSD. They were about 7 years behind. So they got into the process of kind of catching up. And it seemed like every year when they'd finish another batch of audits, another year had passed and they'd have to do another audit for the year that had passed before they could actually get that project moving, the feasibility study moving. So to the extent that audited financials aren't necessary for certain projects, I think that's really important to look at. And then I'm wondering if anybody can speak to, I know internally at the Water Board, there's been an effort to develop metrics and it kind of expected timelines for completing each task. And there's also, my understanding is, plans to share some of that information publicly through a database at some point. I'm wondering if anybody can talk more about those plans and kind of your thoughts on timeline for sharing metrics and data about these projects.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Yeah, we don't have any updates on specific metrics. It's one of those things that we're trying to make sure that we're gathering the right data so we can look at the data and see where we've been and what our baseline is before we make commitments. I mean, we could relatively easily throw out some numbers there in terms of timeframes, but I'm not sure how meaningful it would be at this point. So we're trying to make sure that we're collecting that relevant information. So it's the best I can say now. It's still a work in progress. And part of the challenge too is, for us, the baseline is changing, right? So that having the accounting system change like just a year or so ago, has changed a lot of our processes, and trying to figure out with the new system how to streamline that and then come up with an appropriate baseline. As well as now we're in this teleworking COVID environment too. So trying to factor that in and examine to what extent has that affected what we're doing. And I think Jasmine mentioned, we're also hoping that there's a silver lining too, that we're able to do things, more things digitally than we have before and electronically, and trying to get those new processes in place. So I guess part of it is, as we're developing new processes, we're trying to get those in place and stabilized before, kind of developing and committing to administrative performance metrics. So I know that's not totally satisfying, but I think it's kind of the honest answer at this point. But keep pushing us on it, I would say.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that answer, and I agree that there's a need in the coming year to kind of evaluate what processes and kind of ways we've figured out how to do things in the last 9 months since March should be kept long term, and how to make sure kind of when we return to work and we're back in offices, what pieces of what we've learned over the last year need to stay.
Right. Yeah, and part of the challenge too is like, and just so everybody knows, and if you don't know, my position is in the organization is I'm over our Office of Sustainable Water Solutions. So all of the both drinking water and wastewater, clean water projects for small DACs come through me, whether it's technical assistance or funding agreements and that sort of thing. So I will ask many of the questions that you're asking. I mean, it's actually helpful that you guys are asking those questions, because then our staff who maybe don't listen in, say, to the advisory group meetings or, or aren't part of the other briefings we do, like I'm reflecting your concerns. So if I see something where it's like, why did this take 6 months to go from, A to B when normally I see like a 2-month turnaround time? So all my staff and my managers are aware of those concerns, and often there is a reason, whether it's good or not is up to your opinion, but a lot of times it can be there are issues with getting getting information that we need to move to the next point. There's some hiccup that occurred, sometimes internally, but oftentimes like with the recipient where we haven't gotten a key piece of information. Like a good example is like, if there's a consolidation and we need to the consolidation agreement or MOU for the ongoing operation and maintenance of the project. Those kind of things can really slow things down.
Thank you, Joe. And
Sure.
Michael, thank you for your question. We have time for one more question, and I see Horacio. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, I have some comments. There's a lot of disadvantaged communities and domestic wells that they don't even have nobody to help them fill up an application. And so these systems, they're going to be out of the game because there's no one there to help them. Do you have a list of places where they can go here, like locally, so they can get some help and have somebody help them fill up an application so they can at least get some help? Because otherwise, if there's going to be funds and those people are out of the game, what are we going to be doing to help them out? Is there another self-enterprise here in Monterey County, or how do we tell those people to go get some help?
Yeah, so we have, Self-Help has stepped forward with their program. I know that we also have an initial project going on with the Community Water Center on the Central Coast as well. There's nothing, and all of those I think are just kind of the initial efforts as we wade into this space with domestic wells. We don't have something statewide and comprehensive for the thousands of domestic well owners right now. So we have some of these initial efforts going on. But again, part of what that takes is somebody stepping forward, right? Because we can't do, we don't have the capacity at the state board to engage with individual homeowners and households. So we're looking for partners to help us do that. So we have a few like Self-Help and Community Water Center. I think we also have a program with RCAC as well.
Yes, but Community Water Center is mostly advocacy. They're not applying for water systems. We need some type of help from the county and the state water board, so they can have someone there that these communities can come and ask for help, because otherwise, they're not going to get any help. There's nobody is sponsoring them. They're just out there. The county tells you whether it's a small water system, a state small or domestic well, they just tell you don't drink the water, but there's no help.
Horacio, I live in Monterey County too, and I agree with you. I feel like there is a lack of providers in this area that do that type of work that you're talking about. I know Sac State sometimes works in this area. So we do have some providers, but I agree with you that we would benefit, from outreach to other university systems. I know, we have other state systems, like at the state school level, that are helping in other places across the state, which I would love to see something similar here in Monterey County and for this coastal area, the Central Coast. So, I mean, maybe that's something that we can take back and talk internally about, and get your ideas on that too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Joe. And Horacio, thank you for your question. Thank you, advisory group members, for asking questions, providing your comments during the funding process. And now we would like to open the meeting for public comment. The feedback that you all shared today will be shared with the State Water Board members. We will provide an outline of the meeting notes to the Water Board within 3 weeks. We will now move to our public comment session. This session is limited to public comments for the SAFER Advisory Group on the items in today's agenda. Comments on other SAFER topics, such as general SAFER program or water issues regarding specific communities, will be heard at the SAFER Q&A session this evening at 6 o'clock. We have a number of comments that we have received via email, and we will also encourage you to, if you have any comments, feel free to raise your hand. And if you're joining in by phone, you can press *9. But we will go through the comments that we received via email, and in the questions that we receive, we will respond to those questions during the Q&A session this evening at 6 o'clock. And also, if you are listening in by phone, you can email us at safer@waterboards.ca.gov. Lastly, again, as a reminder, this meeting is being broadcasted on the Cal EPA. If you're watching this event through the webcast only, and you would like to share your comment, the best way to do so is to submit your comment via email at safer@waterboards.ca.gov. All right, so let's get started. I will go through the comments that we received via email first. And the first one, we received a comment from Uriel Saldivar, Senior Policy Advocate for Community Water Center. There are 3 questions. The first question, could staff provide a detailed update either today or at the next Safer Advisory Group meeting on progress for domestic wells and state small communities? Number 2, how does the State Water Board plan to tackle issues related to water affordability, like the affordability threshold and the idea of an affordability pilot as part of upcoming Safer Advisory Group meetings? Number 3, additionally, I do have one clarifying question. Is the list of individuals unveiled today only the new members of the advisory group that will join existing members? So I like to thank Uriel, sorry about that, for your questions, and we will be able to answer those questions during the Q&A session this evening. Next up, we have Laura Rosenberg Hader. This is Laura's comment. I can live safely on only 5 gallons of pure filtered water per day. It's best to give everyone in California a small amount of water that is not contaminated with hexavalent, chromium, nitrates, uranium, etc., and restrict use. Laura, thank you so much for your comment. And the next one, we have a comment from Esther Espinoza, and she provided her comment in Spanish, but we had a staff member translate this for us. See, I am an owner of a private well for more than 16 years, and all this time I have not funds for the water study, and I would like to know what contaminants are dangerous to have in my well. We have only suffered from severe allergies on the skin, but we do not know if it is because of the water we bathe in and if it has affected us in other ways. Support is very necessary for families who do not have resources. Esther, we want to thank you for your comment. Right, let me see if there are any other comments. I don't see any other comments. Anyone who is joining us on Zoom, feel free to raise your hand if you have a comment. And also if you are joining in by phone, go ahead and press *9. And once we call your name, you can unmute yourself.
So during this current time period, I want to thank the advisory group members that have already chimed in and have provided a comment or a question. I just want to clarify, and I will repeat this in Spanish, if Isabel Solorio has any other questions or comments. Isabel, ¿usted tiene una pregunta adicional o quiere hacer un comentario adicional?
Sí, mira, yo...
Yes, I
Gracias.
So Isabel Solorio does have another comment. Again, If you'd like to listen to her comment or question in the English channel, please toggle down to the bottom of your screen, select English so that you can hear the interpreter translate. Okay, muchas gracias, Isabel. Sí, puedes
Thank you very
continuar.
much, Isabel. You can continue now. Look, it's regarding the comment that we had a question previously, and maybe down the line I'll get an answer. My question is, how many organizations have they been provided these funds? Who is supervising these organizations? Those are my questions. And in reality, what are the projects?
So, yeah. Hi, Isabel. It's Joe. I'm gonna. So I'm assuming you're referring to the safe and affordable drinking water funds. Like there's $130 million that were provided last year. And where did that money go? That's your question, and who's overseeing it? Did I get your question right?
I heard that there's different organizations like self-help that they're working specifically in specific projects, but I want to know who else is working on that and what are the projects and who is supervising those projects.
Okay. Yeah. So self-help is one of our technical assistance providers that does cover your area. So we have a funding agreement with them, and I don't know, Jesse, how many projects you have. They're probably in the hundreds, is my guess at this point. And so besides Jesse supervising all of those projects, certainly we have Division of Drinking Water staff, our own DFA staff that are involved in overseeing those projects. And, of course, Jesse and her team often, or I think normally, have an outreach process with the community as well. So there's community involvement and oversight of what's being done. I'm not sure if that answers your question, or did I miss anything, Jesse, in terms of kind of oversight of what you all do?
No, that's a good summary. I guess I would only add that, we have recently really stepped up the frequency of our check-ins with our grant managers and project managers at the Division of Financial Assistance, which has been really helpful in both moving projects ahead as well as moving different pieces of paperwork along, like work plans specifically. So we have probably a weekly interaction with our grant managers at DFA. And I think that's true of all the technical assistance providers at this point.
Thank you, Jesse and Joe and Isabel. Thank you for your
Thank you.
questions.
I believe we have one more commenter raising their hand. I'm sorry, I don't know specifically who you are, but your phone number ends in 154. I see that your hand is raised. I'm going to ask that you unmute yourself. And by doing so, *6. Hello? All right. Well, it does not seem like we can hear anyone on
Hello?
that. Oh, okay, great.
Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, I can hear you too. This is Michael Prado Sr., and I'm sorry I'm barely getting in. I had some wrong numbers here that I was given to enter for the passcode, but I'm glad I got in. It's too bad it's the end of the meeting. But I just wanted to congratulate all of you that are completing your time on serving. And I want to thank the opportunity that I will have to serve. So thank all of you and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, Michael. I apologize for your technical difficulties and the mix-up, but we are glad that you at least made it to some of the meeting. Thank you so much. And then lastly, I do see Lucy. Lucy, I do see your physical hand up. Go ahead and provide.
Is that you, Vanessa?
No, this is
Vanessa?
Pizza Beta.
Okay, well, thank you, okay?
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome, my honor.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead with my question. I do have a question because I know that there is a lot of concerns here in our communities about the financial support for our small water systems, because we understand a lot of our residents cannot afford to pay their water bill at this time due to COVID not being able to work. And I would like to know if there is any organizations or that the State Water Board is working with to see how they could get assistance to be able to make their payment, and for the water systems to continue to operate.
Great question, Lucy. Does anyone want to answer Lucy's question?
Well, I would like to just jump in, and then I'll probably let Joe speak, but we are trying to collect information on water systems that are struggling due to COVID. And I will put in the chat box a website where we're trying to collect that information to get a sense of how significant those problems are, and also what things can be done about it. So I'll kick it over to Joe, but I just wanted to put a plug in for that.
Yeah, well, basically, Michelle, that's what I was going to say is you're in the midst of collecting the information to identify the scope of the problem. So the short answer is we don't have any current programs ourselves to address either revenue shortfalls for water systems or to provide direct assistance to residents who might be struggling to pay their bills.
This is Jessie. May I jump in again? Lucy, if you're aware of systems that are having trouble, would you please contact me directly? I know you have my number. Self-help is doing a couple of different things. We don't necessarily have funds available yet, but we're using our SAFER funds to set up a pilot program to make loans to water systems directly. And then our partner services program has some assistance available to pay directly to consumers. So the customers who are having trouble paying their bills, we may be able to help them on a, one household at a time sort of basis, especially if they are in Visalia or Tulare County. So please feel free to reach out to me if you have questions or want me to try to connect you with somebody.
And Lucy, this is Itza Beta. I just wanted to inform you that piggybacking off of what Michelle and Joe have stated, I do hold the responsibility for checking the COVID shutoff water line. So on a daily basis, I check the COVID line to see if there have been any messages regarding shutoffs that happened after the executive order was signed. And if there is a case that's related to such a situation, then I do work internally with the water boards with another colleague that is responsible for following up with the specific water system. So I wanted to provide you the phone number where either, a phone call could be made. I do return those phone calls, and if assistance is needed in filling out the form, I do that as well. And then I can also follow up on any concerns that might have already been submitted but have not yet received a resolution. So the 800 number is toll free, and it is 844-903-2800. And the voicemail is not restricted only to English and Spanish. The voicemail can be left in any language. We do have a language services contract. So although I only speak English and Spanish, I do have the method of routing that message to our language lead, and then we will then have that interpreted. So there are various ways in which we can reach out and make sure that we assist. But I just wanted to make that something that's known, because I do work on that project directly. So I hope that helps.
And
yes, thank you very much.
I might add to Lucy that if you feel that there's specific water systems, it's also important to include the district engineers, the State Water Board district engineers, and inform them of issues that may be arising too.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lucy, for your question, and all of you in the State Water Board staff for responding to Lucy's question. So with that, we are now wrapping up our public comment session. I want to thank all of you for providing your feedback and giving your and providing a question as well, and for your active participation today. With that, we'll be moving to closing remarks and next steps. We want to, next slide. Perfect, thank you. We want to recap some next steps. We want to,
one more slide.
I think that's,
yes.
Thank you. So we want to let you know that notes that we have taken today will be added to the SAFER website. Upcoming dates that that I want to inform you about is tonight's public Q&A session is from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. And next week on Monday, December 14th, there is an at-risk assessment webinar. And we have our next advisory group meeting in the first quarter of next year. So before we end the meeting, I would like to remind you that we will send a link to the meeting evaluation. We ask that you complete the evaluation by next week on Wednesday, December 16th. We would greatly appreciate your feedback as we move forward to next year. We would like to take your feedback into consideration so that we can add that to our future meetings. And I want to thank all of AG members and advisory group members and members of the public for your participation and for guiding us in the right direction. I also want to thank all of State Water Board SAFER team from Division of Drinking Water, Division of Financial Assistance, and the Office of Public Participation, and our board members and executive leaders for all of their hard work in putting this meeting together. All right, it's time for our SAFER chant. So everyone, please go ahead and unmute yourselves. And at the same time, repeat after me. Water should be safe.
Water should be
Water should be safe.
Water will be safe.
El agua
Debe ser segura.
Y lo vamos a hacer una vez en español. So again, we're going to do it in Spanish. Agua debería ser sana.
Agua
debería ser sana.
Agua será sana.
Agua
será sana.
Thank you again, everyone. Muchas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, all.
Gracias.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Thank
Feliz
you.
Navidad.
Feliz Navidad a todos.
Feliz
Y
Navidad a
año
todos.
nuevo.
Feliz
Cuídense.
año nuevo.
Igual.
Cuídense.
Ok, gracias.
Cuidémonos todos. Hasta luego.
Cuidémonos todos. Sí.